She was a name before she was a person, and he was a pair of hands before he was a man, until the night a broken engine brought them face to face, and everything they'd been taught about where they belonged began to crack apart. Hi dear esteemed viewer. Welcome to our channel. Kindly hit the subscribe button so you can get notifications for our new beautiful stories. The champagne tasted expensive and empty, just like everything else in Isabelle Hartwell's life. She stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, crystal flute in hand, watching the glittering crowd swirl through her father's annual Maritime Foundation gala. $1,500 a plate, black ties and designer gowns. Conversations that never went deeper than stock prices and vacation homes. Her face ached from smiling. Across the room, her father held court near the ice sculpture of a cargo ship, his booming laugh carrying over the string quartet. Richard Hartwell, shipping magnate, philanthropist, titan of industry. Every eye in the room tracked his movements, hungry for a moment of his attention, a word that might translate to opportunity. Isabelle had stopped trying to get him to really see her years ago. A hand touched her elbow. She turned to find Preston Carlisle, son of Carlisle Maritime Shipping, her father's largest competitor and most recent golf partner. Preston's smile was practiced, his cologne overwhelming. "Isabelle, you look stunning tonight," he said, though his eyes had already catalogued her dress, her jewelry, calculated her worth. "Your father mentioned you might save me a dance." Of course he had. Her father had been orchestrating these encounters for months, ever since the merger talks began. Preston wasn't interested in her. He was interested in the hyphenated future, Hartwell Carlisle Shipping. She would be the ribbon on the deal. "Perhaps later," she said, her voice carrying the polite chill she'd perfected over years of these events. "I was just stepping out for some air." She didn't wait for his response. The balcony doors beckoned like an escape hatch. She slipped through them into the cool October night, leaving behind the suffocating warmth of ambition and agenda. The city stretched out below, all lights and movement, people living lives that had nothing to do with quarterly reports and board meetings. Isabelle gripped the marble railing, closed her eyes, and let herself imagine, just for a moment, being someone else. Someone whose name didn't open doors she never asked to walk through. Someone who could make a choice that was just hers. "Miss Hartwell?" A server appeared at her elbow with a tray of champagne. "Can I get you anything?" "You can get me out of here," she thought. But she just shook her head, offered another empty smile, watched the young woman retreat back into the ballroom. Even the staff knew her name, knew to approach with cautious deference. She wasn't a person to them either. She was an heiress, a Hartwell, a figure to be careful around. Inside, the string quartet transitioned into something waltz-like. Through the glass, she could see couples pairing off, her father gesturing toward the balcony, probably sending Preston to retrieve her. Her chest tightened. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through texts that were all business-related, all requests disguised as invitations. Then she opened her calendar and stared at the entry 3 days from now. Vessel christening, Atlantic Star. Another ceremonial appearance, another champagne bottle swung against a hull, another speech about legacy and innovation that her father would write and she would deliver. 26 years old, and she'd never written her own speech. The balcony doors opened behind her. She didn't turn around, assumed it was Preston, prepared her polite deflection. "If you're out here because it's too loud in there, I apologize," her father's voice said. "But people notice when you disappear." Isabelle turned. Richard Hartwell looked distinguished in his tuxedo, silver hair perfectly styled, every inch the commanding presence that had built an empire. But standing this close, she could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he assessed even her. "I just needed a moment," she said. "Preston's a good man. Solid business sense. His father and I think. I know what you think." The words came out sharper than she intended. She softened her tone. "I'm not interested in Preston, Dad." "Interest grows," he said, and she hated how transactional he made it sound. "You're not getting any younger, Isabelle. It's time to think seriously about your future. About the company's future. Maybe I don't want my future to be the company." The words hung between them, dangerous and real. Her father's expression hardened. "Everything you have is because of the company," he said quietly. "Every opportunity, every comfort, every open door. Don't be ungrateful." He turned and walked back inside, leaving her alone with the city lights and the cold understanding that this was her life. This would always be her life, unless she found the courage to choose differently. But courage required knowing what she actually wanted. And Isabelle Hartwell, who had everything, had no idea. 300 miles away, Daniel Reed was covered in grease and didn't give a damn. He lay on his back in the engine room of the SS Meridian, a Heartwell shipping cargo vessel currently docked for emergency repairs. The wrench in his hand was slick with oil, his shirt was ruined, and he'd been working for 14 straight hours. But the engine was purring now, smooth and steady, exactly as it should. "Reed, you beautiful bastard, you did it." Tommy Chun, his fellow engineer, appeared above him, grinning. "Captain says we're back on schedule. Company's going to save $3 million on this turnaround." Daniel slid out from under the machinery, accepted Tommy's hand up. His back screamed in protest, but the satisfaction was worth it. He'd diagnosed the problem in 20 minutes. A cascade failure in the cooling system that 3 other engineers had missed. Fixed it in less than a day. "Someone should probably tell the executives they can stop panicking," Daniel said, wiping his hands on a rag that only spread the grease around. "Yeah, good luck with that. They don't know your name, man. They just know the ship's fixed." Tommy meant it as a joke, but it landed with the familiar weight of truth. Daniel had been with Heartwell Shipping for 5 years, had personally saved the company millions and avoided delays and emergency repairs, had innovated solutions to problems that textbooks said were unsolvable. His personnel file was full of commendations. His paycheck was still middling. The executives who made triple his salary had never once visited the engine rooms where the real work happened. His phone buzzed on the bench. Text from his supervisor. "Corporate wants you at Atlantic Star christening Friday. Photo op for the crew. Suit required." Daniel almost laughed. A photo op stand in the background while executives took credit for the engineering marvel he and his team had actually built. Smile for the cameras while Richard Hartwell's daughter broke a bottle of champagne and probably mispronounced half the technical specifications in her prepared speech. He'd never met Isabelle Hartwell, but he'd seen her in the company newsletter. Always perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, surrounded by the kind of wealth that Daniel had spent his entire life outside of. She'd been born with the world handed to her. Probably never worked a day in her life. Never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Never lost anyone to the kind of corporate negligence that came from caring more about profit margins than safety protocols. Daniel shut off the shower harder than necessary, grabbed his towel, tried to shake off the bitterness. It wasn't her fault she was born into privilege. But it wasn't his fault he resented it either. He dressed in jeans and a clean t-shirt, grabbed his backpack, headed toward the dock exit. The Meridian rose behind him, massive and beautiful, a testament to human ingenuity and engineering excellence. He'd helped build her. He'd saved her today. And on Friday, he'd stand in the background while people who'd never turned a wrench took the credit. The night air hit him as he stepped outside, cooler than expected. The shipyard was quiet this late, just security lights and the soft lap of water against the docks. Daniel stood for a moment, looking at the ships lined up like sleeping giants, feeling the complicated mixture of pride and frustration that had become familiar. "You okay, Reed?" A security guard, Martinez, called from his station. "Yeah, just tired. Heard you saved the Meridian. Hell of a job." Daniel nodded his thanks, started the long walk to the parking lot where his beat-up truck waited. At least Martinez knew his name. At least the people who actually worked, who knew what it took to keep these massive vessels running, saw him. He thought about Friday's christening, about standing in some stiff suit while the Hartwell family smiled for cameras, and decided he'd go. Not because he wanted the photo op, but because he'd helped design the Atlantic Star's propulsion system, and he wanted to see her launched properly. The executives could have their champagne and speeches. Daniel would have the satisfaction of knowing his work kept her afloat. The Atlantic star gleamed in the morning sun like a promise made of steel. Isabelle stood on the platform erected for the christening ceremony, her cream-colored dress catching the breeze off the harbor, her prepared speech folded in her hand. Below her, 200 guests mingled, investors, executives, politicians, journalists. Her father stood beside the podium, working the crowd with the ease of a man who'd spent 40 years turning handshakes into contracts. She'd read through the speech 3 times that morning. It was well written, full of soaring language about innovation and heritage, about Hartwell Shipping's commitment to excellence. Every word had been crafted by her father's communications team. Every sentiment approved by the board. None of it was hers. 10 minutes, Miss Hartwell, an assistant said, appearing at her elbow with a bottle of champagne wrapped in white ribbon. You'll break the bottle on the bow at the conclusion of your father's introduction. Isabelle nodded, accepted the bottle, felt its weight. She'd done this a dozen times before. Smile. Wave. Read the words. Break the bottle. Let the cameras capture the moment that would appear in tomorrow's business section. Hartwell Heiress christens new flagship vessel. The assistant retreated. Isabelle looked out at the Atlantic star, really looked at her. She was magnificent, 40,000 tons of cargo capacity, state-of-the-art navigation systems, the most fuel-efficient propulsion design in the company's fleet. Isabelle had actually read the engineering reports on this one, fascinated despite herself by the innovations that had gone into her construction. She's beautiful, isn't she? Isabelle turned to find an older woman standing beside her, someone she didn't recognize. Not dressed like the executives, not wearing a name tag like the journalists. Just a woman in simple black, looking at the ship with tears in her eyes. Yes, Isabelle said. She is. My son helped design her engines, the woman said softly. He's down there somewhere, probably covered in grease even though they told him to dress nice. She laughed, wiped at her eyes. Sorry. I'm just proud. He works so hard. Something in Isabelle's chest tightened. You should be proud, she said. The engineering on this ship is remarkable. The woman smiled at her, really smiled, like Isabelle was just another person sharing a moment. Then her eyes widened slightly. Oh, you're Isabelle Hartwell. I didn't mean to. Please, Isabelle said quickly. Don't. I'm glad you told me about your son. Her father's voice boomed from the podium, beginning his introduction. The woman squeezed Isabelle's hand once, then disappeared back into the crowd. Isabelle felt the loss of that brief, genuine exchange like something being taken away. She moved toward the platform as her father gestured for her, the champagne bottle in her hands, her smile fixed in place. The speech, the bottle, the photographs. She could do this in her sleep. And then the Atlantic star shuddered. It was subtle, just a tremor that ran through the massive vessel, but Isabelle felt it in her bones. The crowd didn't notice, too focused on her father's speech. But something was wrong. A moment later, a crew member appeared at the base of the platform, speaking urgently to one of the executives. The man's face went pale. He interrupted her father mid-sentence, whispered something. Her father's expression tightened. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Hartwell said smoothly, there appears to be a minor technical matter that requires attention before we proceed. If you'll excuse us for just a few moments, we'll have everything sorted shortly. The crowd murmured. Isabelle watched as several crew members hurried up the gangway onto the ship. Her father was already on his phone, his voice low and sharp. The assistant who'd given her the champagne bottle rushed past. What's happening? Isabelle asked. Pressure spike in the propulsion system, the assistant said without stopping. They're handling it. But no one looked like they were handling it. The executives were clustered together, speaking in tense voices. Her father's face had gone from composed to barely controlled fury. This was supposed to be perfect. This was supposed to be the crown jewel of the fleet's expansion, and something had gone wrong at the worst possible moment. Isabelle set down the champagne bottle, picked up her skirt, and walked toward the gangway. Miss Hartwell, you can't, someone started to say, but she was already climbing onto the ship. She'd been on dozens of vessels. usually for tours carefully orchestrated to show her the bridge, the staterooms, the command centers. She'd never been in the engine room. But she followed the sound of raised voices, the clang of metal on metal, down corridors that grew more industrial with each turn. The heat hit her first when she pushed through the heavy door marked engine room, authorized personnel only. Then the noise, the thrum of machinery, the hiss of steam, voices shouting over the din. And there, in the center of controlled chaos, was a man lying half inside an access panel, tools spread around him, his hands moving with absolute certainty. "Someone get me a flow gauge reading," he called out, not looking up. "And someone else tell those executives that shutting down the system right now would be worse than the problem we're fixing." "Read pressure stabilizing," another engineer called. "Not fast enough. There's a valve sticking somewhere upstream." "Chun, check manifold 3. Isabelle stepped closer, fascinated. She'd never seen anyone work like this, completely absorbed, moving with economy and purpose, commanding the space around him with quiet authority. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his forearms streaked with grease, and he was the most competent person she'd ever seen. "Manifold 3 is clear," Chin shouted. "Then it's manifold 4. Has to be." The man, Reed, slid out from under the access panel, grabbed a different tool, was about to dive back in when he finally noticed Isabelle standing there. He froze. For a moment, they just looked at each other. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair falling across his forehead and eyes that were startlingly green even in the harsh industrial lighting. His face was smudged with grease, his expression somewhere between surprise and annoyance at the interruption. "You can't be down here," he said, not unkindly. "It's not safe." "What's wrong with her?" Isabelle asked. "With who?" "The ship. What's wrong?" He blinked, seemed to register that she actually wanted to know. "Pressure valve in the propulsion system isn't regulating properly. It's sticking, causing spikes that could damage the turbine assembly if we don't get it sorted. Probably a manufacturing defect, possibly a faulty installation. Won't know until I can get eyes on manifold 4. Can you fix it?" Something shifted in his expression. "Yes." "How long?" 20 minutes if everyone stops asking me questions." Isabelle almost smiled. "Then I'll stop asking questions." She stepped back, leaned against a clean section of wall, and watched him work. She expected him to tell her to leave, but he just looked at her for one more moment, something unreadable crossing his face, then dove back into the access panel. She'd never been more aware of being out of place. Her dress, her shoes, her carefully styled hair. Everything about her screamed that she didn't belong in this space of machinery and metal. But she didn't want to leave. Watching him work was like watching someone speak a language she'd never learned, solving a puzzle she couldn't see, creating order from chaos through nothing but knowledge and will. "Manifold 4 accessed," he called out. "There's your problem. Valve seats machined wrong, creating friction." "Chun, I need the replacement valve kit, the one we installed on the Meridian last month." "We don't have that kit on board," Chin said. "Then we improvise. Get me a grinding wheel and the digital micrometer." Tools appeared. He worked in silence for several minutes, the only sound the careful scrape of metal being reshaped. Isabelle found herself holding her breath, though she didn't understand why. There was something mesmerizing about watching someone who knew exactly what they were doing, who moved with absolute confidence born from genuine skill. "Testing pressure regulation," he finally said. "Now." A different kind of sound filled the engine room, smoother, steadier. The tension in the space eased. "Pressure's holding," Chin said. "Reed, you're a goddamn miracle worker." Reed slid out from the access panel, stood up, and for the first time since she'd entered, he really looked at Isabelle. She saw the moment recognition hit him, saw his expression shift from curious to carefully neutral. "You're Richard Hartwell's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. And the way he said it, like her last name was something that explained everything about her, something that created instant distance, made her chest tighten. "Isabelle," she said. "My name is Isabelle. Daniel Reed. Lead propulsion engineer." He wiped his hand on his pants, then seemed to realize it wouldn't help. just made the grease worse. He didn't offer to shake. You should get back up top. They're probably looking for you. Probably, she agreed, but didn't move. That was incredible. What you just did. He looked uncomfortable with the praise. It's just engineering. It's what I'm paid to do. Still, you saved the ceremony. My father, the company, we're lucky to have you. Something flickered across his face, gone too quickly to read. The ship doesn't care who owns her. She just needs someone who understands her. There was weight in those words, something beneath the surface that Isabelle couldn't quite grasp. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to keep him talking in that direct way that felt so different from every careful conversation she usually navigated. But Chun was approaching, and other crew members were congratulating Daniel, and the moment was fracturing. I should go, she said. Yeah. Daniel picked up his tools, already turning back to the work. Then he paused, looked at her once more. You actually read the engineering reports on this ship, didn't you? How did you know? The questions you asked. The way you looked at the problem. Most people just want to know when it'll be fixed. He almost smiled. You wanted to know how. Isabelle felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and warm. I like understanding how things work. Me too, he said quietly. Their eyes held for a beat too long. Then someone called his name, and the spell broke. Isabelle turned and walked back through the corridor, climbed the stairs, emerged into the bright sunlight where her father was pacing and executives were clustered in worried groups. Isabelle, for God's sake, where have you been? Her father demanded. The engine room. I wanted to see what was wrong. The engine room? You can't just... He stopped himself, ran a hand through his silver hair. Is it fixed? Yes. One of your engineers fixed it. Daniel Reed. He was remarkable. Her father's expression suggested he had no idea who Daniel Reed was. Well, good. We'll proceed in 5 minutes. Go fix your makeup. You have grease on your face. Isabelle touched her cheek, found the smudge, didn't care. She walked back to the platform, accepted the champagne bottle again, waited for her cue. But when she gave her speech, she deviated from the script. This ship, she said, looking out at the crowd, represents more than engineering excellence or business expansion. She represents the skill and dedication of every person who built her, who installed every bolt and tested every system. She represents the expertise of people whose names we often don't know, but whose work keeps the world moving. The Atlantic Star is magnificent because of them, because of the engineers and crew who will keep her running, who solved a problem this morning with grace under pressure that most of us will never see. She paused, found Daniel Reed in the crowd below. He was standing near the back, cleaned up slightly, but still looking uncomfortable in anything except his work. Their eyes met across the distance. So when we christen her today, Isabelle continued, we're honoring all of you. Thank you for what you do. She swung the champagne bottle. It shattered against the Atlantic Star's hull in a burst of foam and glass and sunlight. The crowd applauded. Her father's expression was unreadable. But Daniel Reed was looking at her like he'd just seen something he didn't expect. Like maybe she wasn't just a name after all. And Isabelle felt, for the first time in years, like she'd said something that actually mattered. Isabelle couldn't stop thinking about the engine room. 3 days had passed since the christening, and she kept returning to that moment. The heat, the noise, the absolute certainty in Daniel Reed's movements as he fixed what everyone else had deemed impossible. The way he'd looked at her, first with dismissal when he learned her name, then with something else when she'd asked the right questions. She sat in her office at Hartwell Shipping headquarters, staring at her computer screen without seeing it. Her official title was Director of Corporate Relations, which meant she attended charity galas, gave speeches written by other people, and smiled in photographs that reinforced the Hartwell brand. She had a corner office with a view of the harbor, an assistant who managed her calendar, and absolutely no meaningful responsibilities. Her phone buzzed. Text from her father. Lunch meeting with Preston Carlisle. 1 p.m. Don't be late. Isabelle closed her eyes, felt the familiar weight of expectation settle over her shoulders. Preston had called twice since the gala. She'd avoided both calls. Her father was done being subtle. She should focus on that. On the practical reality of her life, the path that had been laid out since birth. Preston was suitable, acceptable, exactly what her world expected. He would never fix an engine covered in grease. He would never look at her the way Daniel Reed had looked at her, like she'd surprised him, like she might be more than her last name. Stop it, she told herself. One conversation in an engine room didn't mean anything. He probably thought she was ridiculous, playing at interest in engineering, slumming for an afternoon before returning to her privileged life. But she couldn't shake the memory of his voice. You wanted to know how. Her desk phone rang. Her assistant's voice. Miss Hartwell, there's a Mr. Reed from engineering on line 2. He says it's regarding the Atlantic Star. Isabelle's heart jumped. Put him through. A click then. Miss Hartwell, this is Daniel Reed. I'm calling because... He paused, and she heard the careful formality in his voice, so different from how he'd spoken in the engine room. Your father's office requested a full report on the propulsion system issue from last week. I wanted to confirm some details before submitting it. Oh! Disappointment flooded through her. Of course it was business. What else would it be? What do you need to know? The speech you gave. You mentioned the engineers by name, spoke about the work. Did you mean that, or was it just good publicity? The question caught her off guard. I meant it. Silence on the line. Then, okay. Is that all? She shouldn't push, shouldn't extend this conversation, but the words came out anyway. Yeah, that's all. Another pause. It was a good speech. Better than the usual corporate nonsense. Something warm bloomed in her chest. Thank you. I should go. I'm sure you're busy. Daniel, she stopped, unsure what she wanted to say. The silence stretched between them, loaded with things neither of them would voice. I'm glad you came down to the engine room, he said finally, his voice softer. Most people wouldn't have. Most people aren't interested in how things actually work. No, they're not. He sounded almost sad. Take care, Miss Hartwell. The line went dead. Isabelle sat holding the phone, feeling like she'd missed something important, like there'd been an opening she should have taken, but didn't know how. Her assistant appeared in the doorway. Miss Hartwell? Your car is ready for the lunch meeting. Isabelle stood, smoothed her skirt, put on the mask of composure she wore so well. But as she rode the elevator down to the lobby, she found herself pulling up the company directory on her phone, scrolling until she found Daniel Reed's personnel file. 5 years with the company. Numerous commendations. Multiple innovations that had saved millions in operational costs. Current salary, $78,000. She stared at that number. Less than her monthly clothing allowance. Less than the company spent on flower arrangements for the executive floor. For someone who'd probably saved the Atlantic Star launch, who designed propulsion systems that revolutionized the fleet. The unfairness of it hit her like a wave. Daniel deleted Isabelle Hartwell's number from his phone immediately after hanging up, then felt stupid for the dramatic gesture and added it back from the call log. He was sitting in the break room of the engineering department, eating a sandwich and trying to focus on the technical manual in front of him. But his mind kept drifting back to that phone call, to the way her voice had caught when she'd started to say his name. Earth to Reed. Tommy Chin dropped into the chair across from him. You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. Just tired. Right. This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain heiress who came down to the engine room last week. Daniel shot him a look. It was a 5-minute conversation. A 5-minute conversation that you haven't shut up about for 3 days. I haven't mentioned her once. Exactly. You always talk about your work. This week. Radio silence. Which means you're thinking about something you don't want to talk about. Tommy grinned. She's pretty, I'll give you that. She's Richard Hartwell's daughter. So she's completely off limits. She's corporate. She's privileged. She's everything I. Daniel trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. Everything you what? Resent? Judge? Or maybe everything you told yourself you'd never be interested in. Daniel closed the manual, pushed it away. It doesn't matter what I'm interested in. She lives in a different world. You saw her at that christening. She belongs on platforms giving speeches, not in engine rooms. Funny. She seemed pretty comfortable in the engine room to me. For 5 minutes. As a novelty. She'll go back to her real life, and I'll go back to mine, and that's how it should be. But even as he said it, Daniel knew he was lying to himself. He'd watched her during that speech, seen the way she deviated from what was clearly a prepared script to acknowledge the crew. Seen the genuine interest in her eyes when she'd asked about the propulsion system. She wasn't what he'd expected. And that was dangerous. His phone buzzed. Text from his supervisor. Executive Suite is requesting engineering presence at operations meeting Thursday. Your name came up. Someone impressed by your work on the Atlantic Star. Daniel stared at the message. In 5 years, he'd never been invited to an executive meeting. The timing felt suspicious, coming just days after meeting Isabelle. Was she behind this? Had she mentioned him to her father? The thought made him uncomfortable. He didn't want opportunities that came from knowing the right people. He wanted to earn advancement through skill, through merit. That was the whole point, proving that someone from his background could succeed based on the work alone. What's wrong? Tommy asked, reading his expression. Nothing. Just more corporate bureaucracy. But it wasn't nothing. It was the exact problem with people like the Hartwells. They moved through the world casually dispensing favors, pulling strings, never realizing that for people like Daniel, those favors came with strings attached. Accept their help, and you were admitting you couldn't make it on your own. Accept their help, and you became one more person in their orbit, grateful and diminished. He thought about Isabelle's voice on the phone, the careful way she'd asked if he meant the speech. Like his opinion mattered to her. Like she needed to know she'd done something right. It would be so easy to let himself believe that moment in the engine room had been real. That the connection he'd felt, the spark of recognition when their eyes met, had been mutual and meaningful. But Daniel had learned young that hope was expensive. His sister Maya had taught him that, dying on a cargo ship with faulty equipment because some executive somewhere had decided quarterly profits mattered more than safety regulations. He couldn't afford to forget that Isabelle Hartwell was part of that system, whether she meant to be or not. Her family's wealth was built on the backs of people like him. People who did the real work while the Hartwells collected the credit and the profits. You're doing it again, Tommy said. Thinking too loud. I'm going back to work. Daniel stood, grabbed his manual, headed for the door. Read. For what it's worth. I saw the way she looked at you during that speech. That wasn't a woman who thought of you as just another employee. Daniel didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Because the truth was, he'd seen it too. And he had no idea what to do with that information. The lunch with Preston Carlisle was exactly as insufferable as Isabelle had anticipated. He'd chosen the restaurant, expensive, exclusive, full of business deals happening over white tablecloths. He'd ordered for her without asking, talked about the merger for 40 minutes without pausing, and checked his phone 3 times during dessert. Your father and I have been discussing potential timelines, Preston said, cutting into his creme brulee with surgical precision. We're thinking an engagement announcement in the spring, wedding in the fall. Something tasteful, of course. The social pages will eat it up. Isabelle set down her fork. Preston, I haven't agreed to any of this. He looked at her with mild surprise, as if she'd just said something charmingly naive. Isabelle, we're both adults. We both understand how these things work. Our families complement each other. The business synergies are obvious. It's a smart move. Marriage isn't a business transaction. Of course not. It's also about compatibility, partnership. We want similar things. We come from similar backgrounds. We understand each other's worlds. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. His smile was indulgent, patient in a way that made her skin crawl. You're intelligent, well-bred, understand the demands of this life. You'll make an excellent partner. Partner. Not wife. Not love. Partner like a business arrangement. Isabelle thought about Daniel Reed's hands, covered in grease, reshaping a valve with absolute precision. Thought about the way he'd looked at her. Really looked like he was trying to understand something complex and worth the effort. "I'm not interested in this arrangement," she said clearly. "I'm sorry if my father led you to believe otherwise, but I need to be direct. I'm not going to marry you, Preston." His expression hardened, the indulgent smile disappearing. "Your father's not going to be pleased. That's between my father and me. Is there someone else?" The question came out sharp, possessive. "Is that what this is about? This is about me not wanting to spend my life with someone who orders my food without asking and checks his phone during dessert." She stood, placed her napkin on the table, ignored the stares from neighboring tables. Preston's face had gone red, his jaw tight. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You think you have options, Isabelle? You're 26. Your father's not going to let you drift forever. Eventually, you'll have to choose someone suitable. It might as well be me. Goodbye, Preston." She walked out of the restaurant, her heart pounding, adrenaline singing through her veins. Her phone started ringing before she'd made it to the car. Her father, undoubtedly already hearing from Preston. She declined the call, then turned off her phone entirely. The driver was waiting, ready to take her back to the office. But Isabelle didn't want to go back to that building, that desk, that carefully constructed life that felt more like a cage every day. "Take me to the shipyard," she said. "The engineering department." The driver's eyebrows rose slightly. "Miss Hartwell? Please." The shipyard. They drove in silence through the city, toward the industrial waterfront, where the real work of Hartwell shipping happened. Isabelle had been to the shipyards before, but always for carefully orchestrated tours, always with an entourage of executives and photographers. She'd never just shown up. She had the driver drop her at the main entrance, told him she'd call when she was ready. Then she stood there, looking at the massive structures around her. Dry docks and cranes and ships in various states of construction and repair, and realized she had no idea what she was doing. She couldn't just walk into the engineering department and ask for Daniel Reed. What would she say? That she'd rejected a marriage proposal and immediately thought of him? That she wanted to see him work again, wanted to have another conversation where she felt like a real person instead of a business asset? God, she was pathetic. Isabelle turned to go, call her driver back, retreat to the safety of her normal life, and walked directly into someone coming out of the building. "I'm so sorry, she started, then stopped. Daniel Reed stood in front of her, wearing work pants and a company t-shirt, carrying a tablet and looking at her with complete bewilderment. "Miss Hartwell? What are you doing here?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. Up close, in daylight, he was even more striking than she'd remembered, sharper angles, those green eyes that seemed to see too much, an intensity that made her feel exposed and safe simultaneously. "I don't know," she said honestly. I wanted to see how things work. Really work. Not a tour. Not a photo opportunity. Just real work." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You can't be here." The words landed like a rejection. "Oh, of course. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I don't mean you're not allowed. I mean I can't be the one showing you around." He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "People will talk. They'll say I'm trying to get ahead by getting close to the boss's daughter. I can't have that. I wouldn't do that to you," Isabelle said. "I wouldn't let anyone think. You don't understand. You can't control what people think. And in my position, reputation is everything I have. I'm not here because of family connections. I'm here because I earned it." His voice was quiet but firm. "I can't risk that." She understood then. Her presence wasn't just awkward, it was dangerous to him. Her very existence as Richard Hartwell's daughter made her toxic to anyone trying to succeed on merit alone. "You're right. I'm sorry." She stepped back, created distance between them. "I wasn't thinking. Why did you really come here?" Daniel asked, and there was something in his voice, not anger, but something softer. Curiosity, maybe. Or hope. Isabelle could lie. Should lie. Make up something about a project or a report. But she was so tired of lying. Because talking to you in that engine room was the first real conversation I've had in months, she said. Maybe years. Because you saw me as a person, not a Hartwell. And I wanted to feel that again, just for a few minutes. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and dangerous. Daniel's expression shifted. She watched walls come up, watched him physically pull back even though he hadn't moved. You should go, he said, but there was no heat in it. Just resignation. This can't happen. Whatever you think this is, it can't happen. I know. Your world and mine, they don't mix. You know that, right? I know, she said again, and felt the truth of it like a stone in her chest. Daniel nodded once, turned to walk back into the building. Then stopped, looked back at her. For what it's worth, he said quietly. That conversation in the engine room, it was real for me too. Then he was gone, leaving Isabelle standing alone in the shipyard, feeling like she'd just lost something she never actually had. She called her driver, rode back to the office in silence, turned her phone back on to find 17 missed calls from her father. By the time she reached her desk, her assistant was hovering nervously in the doorway. Your father wants to see you immediately. Of course he did. Isabelle walked to the executive suite, knocked on her father's door, entered to find him behind his desk with an expression she'd learned to read decades ago. Controlled fury. Preston called, he said. Care to explain? I told him I'm not interested in marrying him. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me. This merger. I don't care about the merger, Dad. I don't want to marry Preston Carlisle. I don't want to be part of your business arrangements. Her father stood, walked to the window overlooking the harbor. What do you want, Isabelle? I want to matter. I want to do something real. I want to make my own choices. You think you know what real work is? He turned to face her. You think you understand what it takes to build something, to maintain it? You've never wanted for anything. You've never had to fight for anything. Everything you have because of this company, because of the name Hartwell. And you're ready to throw that away for what? Some fantasy of independence. It's not a fantasy. It's my life. Your life is here. In this company. Continuing what I've built. I won't have you throwing it away chasing some romantic notion of finding yourself. Isabelle met her father's eyes, saw the immovable certainty there. Saw, too, the fear beneath it. Fear of losing control, fear of his daughter becoming someone he didn't recognize. I'm not throwing anything away, she said quietly. I'm trying to find something worth keeping. She left before he could respond, walked back to her office, sat at her desk with its perfect view and complete emptiness. Her eyes drifted to the harbor, to the ships coming and going, to the world of real work happening just out of sight. And she thought about green eyes and grease-stained hands, and a man who'd looked at her like she mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with her last name. This can't happen, he'd said. But Isabelle was beginning to realize that the things that couldn't happen were the only things. The memo arrived in Daniel's inbox at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, marked urgent from corporate operations. All senior engineering staff required to participate in upcoming fleet modernization initiative. Engineering lead Daniel Reed assigned as technical liaison for executive oversight team. First consultation meeting scheduled Thursday, 9 a.m., conference room A, executive suite. Daniel read it 3 times, his coffee going cold in his hand. Executive oversight team. Which meant Richard Hartwell. Which potentially meant Isabelle Hartwell, depending on what her actual role in the company was beyond ceremonial appearances. He'd spent the past week deliberately not thinking about her. Not thinking about the way she'd shown up at the shipyard looking lost and determined. Not thinking about her admission that their conversation had been real. Not thinking about how he'd walked away from her even though every instinct had been screaming at him to stay. Tommy appeared at his desk, already grinning. Did you see the memo? I saw it. Fleet Modernization Initiative. That's huge. That's career-making stuff, Reed. You'll be working directly with the executives, showing them what you can do. Or I'll be doing their grunt work while they take credit for it. When did you become such a cynic? About the same time I realized merit only gets you so far in a company where the boss's daughter can show up anywhere she wants. Tommy's expression shifted to something more serious. She got to you, didn't she? Daniel didn't answer. Couldn't answer honestly without admitting things he'd been trying hard not to acknowledge. Look, Tommy said, I know you've got your principles. I know you want to earn everything on your own terms. But read. Sometimes opportunity knocks in unexpected ways. That doesn't make it less legitimate. It does if the opportunity exists because I had one conversation with the right person. Or maybe the opportunity exists because you're brilliant at what you do and someone finally noticed. Tommy grabbed his shoulder. Don't sabotage yourself out of pride. Just see what the meeting's about. After Tommy left, Daniel pulled up the company organizational chart, found Isabelle's title, Director of Corporate Relations, reporting directly to the CEO. Which meant she might not be involved in operational initiatives. Which meant this meeting might have nothing to do with her. The relief he felt at that thought was immediately followed by disappointment, which made him angry at himself all over again. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, threatening rain. Daniel wore the one good suit he owned, bought for his sister's funeral 5 years ago, worn maybe twice since then. He felt like he was in costume, playing at being someone who belonged in executive conference rooms. The executive suite occupied the entire top floor of the headquarters building. Daniel had never been up here before. Everything was polished wood and brass fixtures and original artwork on the walls. A receptionist directed him to conference room A with the kind of professional courtesy that made it clear she knew exactly where he ranked in the hierarchy. He was early, 20 minutes early, because being late was unthinkable. The conference room was empty, dominated by a massive table that could seat 20 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the harbor, where ships moved like toys in the distance. Daniel set down his portfolio, tried not to feel out of place, failed completely. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. He turned. Isabelle stood in the doorway, holding a tablet and wearing a navy business suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But there were shadows under her eyes he hadn't noticed before, and her smile didn't quite reach them. Miss Hartwell, he said formally, I didn't know you'd be part of this meeting. My father insisted I take a more active role in operations. Something bitter crossed her expression. Apparently, I need to prove I'm serious about the company. An awkward silence stretched between them. They hadn't spoken since the shipyard, since those loaded admissions neither of them knew what to do with. About last week, Isabelle started. We don't need to talk about that, Daniel cut in, probably too sharply. We both acknowledged it couldn't happen. We're colleagues now, apparently. Let's just keep it professional. He watched something shudder in her expression. Of course. Professional. She moved to the far end of the table, as far from him as possible, and focused intently on her tablet. Daniel felt like an asshole, but didn't know how to fix it. Didn't know if he should fix it. Other executives began filtering in, operations managers, financial analysts, a vice president whose name Daniel should probably know but didn't. They nodded at him with the vague acknowledgement reserved for lower-level employees who'd been temporarily promoted to relevance. Richard Hartwell entered last, commanding immediate attention without saying a word. His eyes landed on Daniel, assessed him with the same calculating look Daniel had seen him give equipment purchases. Mr. Reed, glad you could join us. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Don't thank me. Thank the people who kept mentioning your name in relation to the Atlantic Star's successful launch. His gaze flicked briefly to Isabelle, then back. I understand you have innovative ideas about propulsion efficiency? Yes, sir. I've been developing a modified turbine design that could reduce fuel consumption by up to 18% while increasing power output by. Save the technical details for the presentation. We're here to discuss the Fleet Modernization Initiative's scope and timeline. Richard gestured to the screen at the front of the room. Peterson, walk us through the numbers. The meeting devolved into exactly what Daniel had expected. Executives talking about cost projections and market advantages, while occasionally asking him to confirm technical feasibility. He was a prop, essentially. A way to ensure they weren't promising things engineering couldn't deliver. An hour in, they broke for coffee. Daniel stood by the windows, trying to calculate how many more of these meetings he'd have to endure, when Isabelle approached. "You should speak up more," she said quietly. "When they ask about feasibility, you're giving yes or no answers. You should be explaining the innovations, making them understand the value. I'm not here to sell ideas. I'm here to confirm engineering capabilities. You're here because you're brilliant and someone should be listening to you." There was heat in her voice, frustration. "But you won't let anyone listen. You just give them what they ask for and nothing more. Maybe because every time I try to contribute more, I get talked over or dismissed. So you've stopped trying? I've learned to pick my battles." Isabelle studied him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. "You're angry. Not at them. At me. For being here. For putting you in this position." Daniel wanted to deny it. Couldn't. "I don't want opportunities that come because I know the right people." "You mean you don't want opportunities that come because you know me?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "For what it's worth, Daniel, I had nothing to do with you being invited to this initiative. I found out you were assigned when I saw the meeting roster this morning. My father made this decision based on recommendations from your supervisors." "Then why did he look at you when he mentioned the Atlantic Star?" "Because I changed my speech that day. Because I went off script to acknowledge the engineering team. He was reminding me that actions have consequences, that I drew attention to people like you." Her voice dropped. "He was warning me, not crediting me." Daniel processed that, felt his assumptions shift. "Isabelle." "Ms. Hartwell," she corrected, matching his earlier formality. "Let's keep it professional, remember?" Before he could respond, Richard called them back to the table. The meeting dragged on for another hour, covering budget allocations and procurement timelines. Daniel contributed when directly asked, said nothing otherwise, felt Isabelle's gaze on him several times but refused to meet her eyes. Finally, Richard closed his portfolio. "One more item. The initiative requires site visits to assess current fleet conditions. Reed, you'll accompany the executive team to our facility in Portland next week. 3 days, full assessment." "Sir, I have 3 active projects that require." "Delegate them. This is priority 1. Richard stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Isabelle, you'll coordinate the logistics. Make sure Reed has everything he needs." Everyone filed out. Daniel gathered his papers, trying to process the idea of 3 days in close quarters with Isabelle Hartwell, trying to figure out how to maintain professional distance when she kept cracking through his defenses. "Daniel, wait." He turned. Isabelle had stayed behind, was closing the conference room door. "We need to address this," she said. "Address what?" "Whatever this is. This tension. This thing we're both pretending isn't happening." She crossed her arms, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "You said it couldn't happen. I agreed. But we're going to be working together now, and I can't spend the next 3 months walking on eggshells around you." "I'm not asking you to walk on eggshells. No, you're just freezing me out. Being coldly professional. Treating me like I'm the enemy. You're not the enemy. You're Richard Hartwell's daughter. Which makes you untouchable for very practical reasons. Stop calling me that." The words came out sharp, almost desperate. "Stop reducing me to my father's daughter. I have a name. I'm a person. And yes, I understand the complications, but I'm tired of being treated like I'm just an extension of the company, even by someone who should know better." The vulnerability in her voice did something to Daniel's carefully constructed walls. He took a step toward her without meaning to. "You want to know why I'm keeping my distance," he said. "Because last week at the shipyard, you told me that conversation in the engine room was the first real connection you'd had in months. And I've been thinking about that every single day since. I've been thinking about the way you looked at me during your speech. I've been thinking about how badly I wanted to say yes when you showed up asking to see real work." He stopped, forced himself to be honest. "You scare the hell out of me, Isabelle." She stared at him. "I scare you? You make me want things I can't afford to want. You make me question every principle I've built my life around. One conversation with you, and I'm ready to throw away 5 years of deliberately staying invisible, keeping my head down, earning my place through work alone." His voice dropped. "Do you understand what that means? You're a complication I can't handle. Maybe I don't want to be handled. Maybe I want to be someone's complication." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Daniel knew he should step back, create distance, end this conversation before it went somewhere they couldn't return from. Instead, he said, "Tell me something real. Not Miss Hartwell, daughter of the shipping magnate. You, Isabelle. Something true." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I turned down a marriage proposal last week. Preston Carlisle. My father's been pushing the match for months, perfect merger of empires. Preston ordered my food without asking and talked about our wedding like it was a corporate acquisition." She met his eyes. "And all I could think about during that lunch was a man who fixes engines and sees me like I'm worth the effort of understanding." Daniel's breath caught. "Isabelle, your turn. Something real." He shouldn't. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid, actual honesty, actual connection. But she was looking at him with those eyes that demanded truth, and he was so tired of performing composure. "I had a sister, Maya. She died 5 years ago in a shipping accident. Faulty equipment, negligent maintenance, cost-cutting by executives who never set foot on the vessels they profit from." The old pain surfaced, sharp as ever. "I became an engineer because of her. Because I wanted to make sure ships were safe, that someone actually cared about the work instead of just the margins. And I've spent 5 years resenting people like your father, people like you, because you're part of a system that values profit over lives." Isabelle's face had gone pale. "Daniel, I'm so. But then you came down to the engine room. And you asked how things worked, not because you wanted to seem interested, but because you actually were. You changed your speech to acknowledge people whose names you didn't even know. You showed up at the shipyard just to feel real for a few minutes." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're not what I expected. And I don't know what to do with that." The confession hung between them, raw and unfinished. "The Portland trip," Isabelle said finally. 3 days. We'll be working closely. Probably driving each other crazy. Probably. Maybe we could try something radical." A small smile played at her lips. "We could try being honest. No pretending there's nothing here. No forcing professional distance that neither of us feels. Just see what happens when we stop fighting it." "That's a terrible idea." "I know. Your father would lose his mind. Undoubtedly. I could lose my job. My reputation. Everything I've worked for." "Yes," she said quietly. "You could. And I could lose the only chance I have at making my own choice about who matters to me." Daniel looked at her, really looked. Saw the loneliness beneath the polish, the courage beneath the uncertainty, the woman who was tired of being a name and wanted to be a person. He knew he should walk away. Knew every logical reason to maintain distance, to protect himself, to remember that their worlds were incompatible. But logic had never felt more meaningless. 3 days in Portland, he said. No promises. No expectations. Just honesty. Just honesty, she agreed. They stood there for another moment, neither moving, both aware they'd just agreed to something that could destroy them or save them or possibly both. Then Isabelle's phone buzzed. Reality intruding. She glanced at it, sighed. My father. Wanting the logistics report. You should go. I should. But she didn't move. Then, quietly, thank you. For what? For telling me about your sister. For being honest. For seeing me as more than a Hartwell. Thank you for being more than a Hartwell. She smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen from her all morning. Then she left, and Daniel was alone in the conference room with the harbor spread out below and the distinct feeling that he'd just stepped off a cliff with no idea where he'd land. His phone buzzed. Text from Tommy. How'd the meeting go? Daniel typed back. I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Then he deleted it and wrote instead. Fine. Tell you later. Because some mistakes were worth making. And some complications were worth the chaos. Portland was in 6 days. Daniel had 6 days to either come to his senses or accept that he was about to risk everything for a woman he barely knew but couldn't stop thinking about. He suspected he already knew which one it would be. The flight to Portland was supposed to be on the company jet with the full executive team. Then Richard Hartwell's assistant called at 5 a.m. the morning of departure with a change of plans. Emergency board meeting, executives delayed by 24 hours, but the facility inspection couldn't be postponed because of scheduling conflicts with the shipyard workers. Mr. Reed and Miss Hartwell will proceed as scheduled. The assistant said in a tone that suggested this was non-negotiable. A commercial flight has been booked. You'll conduct the preliminary assessment, and the executive team will join you tomorrow. Which was how Daniel found himself sitting in seat 12B of a Delta flight, with Isabelle Hartwell in 12A, acutely aware that they were alone together for the first time since their conversation in the conference room. "This feels like a setup," Daniel said as the plane leveled off. Isabelle looked up from her laptop. "What do you mean? Your father delays himself and the entire executive team, but sends us ahead anyway? That's not coincidence. You think my father is matchmaking?" She almost laughed. "Trust me, Daniel, the last thing Richard Hartwell wants is his daughter getting close to an engineer." "Then what is this?" She was quiet for a moment, then closed her laptop. "A test, probably. He knows I changed my speech at the christening. He knows I've been asking questions about operations, pushing to be involved in actual work instead of just ceremonial appearances. This is him calling my bluff, seeing if I can actually handle the technical side, or if I'll prove I'm just playing at competence." "That's pretty cold." "That's my father." No emotion in her voice, just statement of fact. Everything's a test. Everything's a lesson about why his way is the only way that works. Daniel studied her profile as she stared out the window. "What happens if you pass his test?" "I don't know. I've never passed one before." The admission was so honest, so raw, that Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. "Isabelle, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't be nice to me right now. I'll fall apart, and we're on a plane full of people." So Daniel stayed quiet, pulled out his tablet, pretended to review technical specifications while sneaking glances at the woman beside him who was holding herself together through sheer will. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Isabelle ordered coffee black. Daniel did the same. Their hands brushed when they both reached for the creamer at the same time, and the contact sent electricity up his arm. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be." They flew in silence for a while. Then Isabelle said, without looking at him, "Tell me more about your sister." Daniel tensed. "Why?" "Because you mentioned her in the conference room, and then stopped. Because I can tell it still hurts. Because I want to understand you." She turned to face him. "And because we agreed to honesty, remember?" He did remember. Had been thinking about little else for 6 days. "Maya was 8 years younger than me," he said finally. "Surprise baby," my mom used to call her. She was brilliant. Wanted to be a marine biologist, spent every summer volunteering at the aquarium. She was everything good about the world, you know? Optimistic, curious, kind to everyone. How did it happen? She got a job working galley on a cargo ship the summer after her freshman year. Wanted to save money for school, wanted to see the ocean. 3 weeks into the contract, there was an accident, steam line rupture in the engine room. Faulty valve, corroded pipes, maintenance that had been deferred too many times. His voice went flat, reciting facts because feeling them was still too much. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Burns over 60% of her body. She died 2 days later. Isabelle's hand found his, squeezed hard. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. The company settled with my parents. Not so generous payout, NDA attached, made the whole thing go away." He looked at their joined hands, at her perfectly manicured nails against his calloused fingers. "I was finishing my engineering degree. I spent the next year investigating what had happened, learning about maritime regulations, understanding how corners get cut to save money. And I decided that if I was going to work on ships, I'd make damn sure they were safe. That no one else would lose a sister because some executive in an office decided maintenance was too expensive. Is that why you resent my father? People like him? Partly. But it's more than that. It's the whole system. The way the people who do the actual work are invisible to the people who profit from it. The way guys like me can design revolutionary propulsion systems and save millions in operating costs, but we're still just employees, easily replaced, never valued. He pulled his hand away, immediately missed her warmth. And then there's you. Me. You're the embodiment of everything I've trained myself to resent. You were born into wealth I'll never see. You got opportunities without earning them. You have a title and an office and a salary for doing work that... He stopped himself. For doing work that doesn't matter? She finished quietly. You can say it. It's true. I wasn't going to say that. But you were thinking it. She turned back to the window. Everyone thinks it. Director of Corporate Relations. That's code for make her feel useful without giving her real responsibility. I show up at events, I smile for cameras, I occasionally give speeches someone else wrote. I'm decorative. A Hartwell on display. The bitterness in her voice mirrored something in him. Is that why you came to the shipyard? He asked. Why you're pushing to be involved in this initiative? I'm tired of being decorative. I'm tired of not mattering. She looked at him with those eyes that were too honest, too vulnerable. Do you know what it's like to be 26 years old and realize you've never done anything that actually required your presence? That you're completely interchangeable with any other person who happens to share your last name? No, but I know what it's like to be 32 and realize that no matter how good you are at your work, you'll always be seen as just another employee. That the system doesn't reward excellence, it rewards proximity to power. We're both trapped, Isabelle said softly. Just in different cages. Yeah, we are. The plane hit turbulence, jolting them. Isabelle's coffee sloshed, and Daniel reached out instinctively to steady it, his hand covering hers on the cup. They stayed that way for a moment too long, awareness crackling between them. This is a bad idea, Daniel said. Us. Whatever this is. I know. Your father would fire me if he knew I was having these thoughts about you. Probably. I could lose everything I've worked for. Yes, she agreed. You could. But Daniel, what if the thing you're working for isn't worth having if it means never taking a risk on something real? He didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know if he wanted to. The Portland facility was older than the main shipyard, built in the 1970s and showing its age. Daniel and Isabelle arrived just before noon, were greeted by the local operations manager, a weathered man named Bill Hutchins who looked relieved to see someone from corporate who actually understood engineering. I've got concerns about 3 of our vessels, Bill said, walking them through the facility. The inspection reports say they pass, but I've got 30 years in this business, and I can tell when something's not right. They spent the afternoon going through the dry docks, Daniel examining hulls and propulsion systems, while Isabelle took detailed notes, asked surprisingly insightful questions, translated between Bill's practical concerns and corporate requirements. You actually know what you're talking about, Bill said to her at one point, genuine surprise in his voice. I've been studying, Isabelle replied. Turns out engineering manuals are more interesting than charity gala seating charts. Daniel caught her eye, saw the small smile playing at her lips, felt something warm expand in his chest. By 6 p.m., they'd completed the preliminary assessment. Bill offered to take them to dinner, but Isabelle politely declined, said they needed to compile their notes. Which was how they ended up in the hotel restaurant, laptops open, surrounded by technical documents and half-eaten food. This is bad, Daniel said, reviewing the data from one of the vessels. The SS Portland has structural stress fractures in 3 critical load points. She should not be in service. But the inspection report cleared her. The inspection report was superficial. Look, he pulled up the photos he'd taken. These fractures are hidden behind panels. You'd only find them if you were specifically looking, if you knew what to look for. Someone signed off on this ship without actually doing a thorough inspection. Isabelle's face had gone pale. That's negligence. That's standard operating procedure when companies care more about keeping vessels in service than keeping them safe. The old anger surfaced. This is exactly what killed Maya. Corners cut, inspections rubber-stamped, warnings ignored because downtime costs money. We have to ground the vessel. Your father's not going to like that. The Portland is one of the highest-earning ships in the fleet. Taking her out of service will cost millions. I don't care what my father likes. This is a safety issue. She was already typing rapidly. I'm drafting a report now. We'll send it tonight. Recommend immediate grounding pending full structural assessment. Daniel watched her work, saw the determined set of her jaw, the way her fingers flew across the keyboard. This wasn't decorative Isabelle Hartwell giving a prepared speech. This was someone who'd found her spine. Your father's really not going to like this, he said. Good. Maybe it's time I stop caring so much about what my father likes. They worked in focused silence for an hour, building the case for grounding the Portland. Daniel provided the technical analysis. Isabelle framed it in corporate language that couldn't be dismissed. When they finished, the report was 20 pages of damning evidence. Send it, Isabelle asked, finger hovering over the button. Send it. She did. They both stared at the confirmation, understanding they'd just started something that couldn't be undone. Isabelle closed her laptop with deliberate care. I need a drink. Same. They moved from the restaurant to the hotel bar, found a quiet corner booth, ordered whiskey neat for him and wine for her. The bar was dimly lit, nearly empty this late on a Tuesday night. Thank you, Isabelle said after her first sip. For what? For not trying to talk me out of sending that report. For treating this like it matters. It does matter. If that ship is compromised and something happens. He couldn't finish the sentence. I know. She was quiet for a moment. I read about the accident. Your sister's accident. After you mentioned it, I looked it up in the company archives. Daniel went very still. Why? Because I needed to understand. Because you were right. I'm part of a system that values profit over safety. And I needed to see what that actually means, what it costs. Her voice was thick. The company my father's corporation bought, Meridian Shipping, they deferred maintenance on that vessel for 3 years. There were 6 different reports flagging the steam system as a risk. All of them ignored because fixing it would have required taking the ship out of service. I know. I read all the reports during the investigation. Hartwell Shipping bought Meridian 6 months after the accident. My father instituted comprehensive safety reforms across the entire fleet. New inspection protocols, mandatory maintenance schedules, increased regulatory compliance. She met his eyes. Daniel, your sister's death led to industry-wide changes. My father used her case as the foundation for reforming maritime safety standards across multiple companies. Daniel felt like the ground had shifted under him. What? He never publicized it because of the settlement NDAs. But he presented the reforms at an industry conference, used the accident data as evidence for why stricter protocols were necessary. He got 4 other shipping companies to adopt similar standards. She pulled out her tablet, showed him documents he'd never seen before. Internal memos, conference presentations, regulatory filings. Your sister saved lives, Daniel. Because of what happened to her. Because my father saw it as a wake-up call. Ships are safer. The work you do, the safety checks you insist on, the maintenance standards you hold. That's all built on the foundation of reforms that happened because of Maya. Daniel couldn't speak. Couldn't process what she was telling him. He'd spent 5 years angry at Richard Hartwell, at the system, at everything the Hartwells represented. He'd never known that his sister's death had meant something beyond tragedy, had created change beyond one settlement check. I thought you should know, Isabelle said softly. I thought you should know that she mattered. That what happened to her mattered. Something broke in Daniel then. 5 years of carefully contained grief, of anger that had nowhere to go, of guilt for surviving when she didn't. He put his head in his hands, shoulders shaking, and felt Isabelle move closer, felt her arm around him, her presence steady and real. I'm sorry, he managed. I'm sorry, Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for grieving someone you loved. They sat like that for a long time, Daniel trying to remember how to breathe, Isabelle holding him together. The bartender glanced over once, then tactfully looked away. When Daniel finally lifted his head, his eyes were red but clear. "I've been so angry for so long," he said. "At your father, at people like him. I've been carrying this around like armor, using it to justify keeping my distance from anything that felt like privilege or power or—" He looked at her. "Or you. I understand why. But you're not your father. And your father isn't who I thought he was. Nothing is as simple as I wanted it to be." "Nothing ever is," Isabelle agreed. She was still close, her arm around his shoulders, her face inches from his. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." "Okay. I'm falling for you. I know we agreed to no expectations, no promises, just honesty. But the honest truth is that every time I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. You make me want to be braver. You make me believe I could be someone who matters for reasons that have nothing to do with my last name." She took a shaky breath. "And that terrifies me almost as much as it terrifies you." Daniel looked at her, at this woman who'd walked into an engine room in an expensive dress and asked real questions, who'd stood up to her father and sent a report that would cost the company millions, who was holding him together when he was falling apart. "I'm falling for you too," he said. "And I have no idea what to do about it." "Neither do I. Your father's going to lose his mind when he finds out. Undoubtedly. I could still lose everything." "So could I," she said quietly. "But maybe some things are worth the risk." She leaned in slowly, giving him time to pull back, to remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But Daniel had spent 5 years playing it safe, keeping his distance, protecting himself from anything that felt like hope. He closed the distance between them and kissed her. It was tentative at first, both of them aware they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Then Isabelle's hand came up to his face, and Daniel pulled her closer, and suddenly it wasn't tentative at all. It was desperate and real and inevitable. All the tension and connection and impossible attraction of the past few weeks pouring into one moment of absolute clarity. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. Your father's going to kill me. Probably. Worth it." Isabelle smiled, a real smile, radiant and unguarded. "Completely worth it." They stayed in the bar for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, hands intertwined on the table, no longer pretending there wasn't something profound happening between them. They talked about Maya, about dreams deferred and chances never taken. They talked about what it meant to build a life that mattered, to choose authenticity over safety. When they finally headed upstairs, they stopped outside Isabelle's room. Daniel knew he should say goodnight, maintain some boundaries, not rush into something that already felt overwhelming. But Isabelle took his hand, looked at him with those honest eyes, and said, "Stay. Just stay. We don't have to do anything except not be alone." So he did. They fell asleep in her room, fully clothed on top of the covers, hands still intertwined. Two people who'd been lonely for far too long finally finding something that felt like home. The email from Richard Hartwell arrived at 3 a.m., marked urgent. Isabelle's phone buzzed. She stirred, checked it, went pale in the dim light from the screen. "Daniel," she whispered. "Wake up." He came awake instantly. "What's wrong?" "My father. He's read our report." She turned the phone so he could see. The email was short and furious. "Ground the Portland immediately. Full investigation. Executive team arriving Portland 8 a.m. tomorrow. We need to discuss your methods of preliminary assessment. Both of you better have answers." "That doesn't sound good," Daniel said. "No, it doesn't." But Isabelle didn't look scared. She looked determined. "But we did the right thing. The safe thing. And I'm not apologizing for that. Even if it costs you?" Even then, she looked at him, at this man who'd somehow become her ally and her hope in the span of a few weeks. "We face him together?" "Together," Daniel agreed. They both knew the next day would bring consequences. But lying there in the dark, still holding hands, they also knew that some risks were worth taking. Some connections were worth fighting for. And sometimes the right choice was the one that cost you everything, but gave you a chance at something real. Richard Hartwell arrived at the Portland facility at 7:53 a.m. with 3 board members, 2 attorneys, and an expression that could cut steel. Daniel and Isabelle met them in the conference room, both running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. They'd spent the early morning reviewing their report, strengthening their case, preparing for the confrontation they knew was coming. "Explain to me," Richard said without preamble, "why I received a report at midnight recommending we ground one of our highest-earning vessels based on a preliminary assessment. Because the SS Portland has critical structural failures that make her unsafe for operation," Isabelle said, her voice steady. "The fractures we documented. I've seen the documentation. What I want to know is what qualified either of you to make that determination without consulting the full engineering team, without proper chain of command, without... Dad, people could die." The room went silent. Isabelle had never interrupted her father in a professional setting before. Never called him Dad, instead of Sir, in front of the board. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Miss Hartwell, perhaps you'd like to reconsider your tone." "No, I wouldn't." She stood, moved to the presentation screen, pulled up the photos Daniel had taken. "These fractures are in load-bearing sections of the hull. Under stress, which that vessel experiences daily, they could catastrophically fail. The ship could literally break apart. And we have documentation showing that the last 3 inspections missed these issues because they were superficial, because someone was more concerned with keeping the ship in service than ensuring she was safe." One of the board members leaned forward. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious problem," Daniel interjected. "And it's not isolated to the Portland. I found similar oversights in 2 other vessels during yesterday's assessment. Your Portland facility has been cutting corners on inspections for at least 18 months. That's enough, Mr. Reed." Richard's voice was ice. "You were brought here as technical support, not to make policy recommendations or accusations about facility management. I was brought here to assess fleet conditions. That's what I did. The fact that you don't like my findings doesn't make them less true." Richard stood, walked to the window overlooking the shipyard. The tension in the room was suffocating. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but dangerous. "You're both dismissed. Wait outside while the board discusses this." "Actually," one of the attorneys said quietly, "I think we should hear the rest of their assessment. If there are legitimate safety concerns, the company's liability exposure is significant." Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Continue." For the next hour, Daniel and Isabelle walked the board through every finding, every photo, every piece of evidence supporting their recommendation. They'd divided the presentation strategically. Daniel handled the technical analysis. Isabelle translated it into business risk and regulatory implications. They moved in sync, anticipated each other's points, built a case that was impossible to dismiss. By the end, even the most skeptical board member looked convinced. "Recommendation?" Richard asked the attorney. "Ground all 3 vessels immediately. Full structural assessments. If Reed's analysis is correct, and I have no reason to believe it isn't, our exposure on this is enormous. 1 accident, 1 failure, and we're looking at wrongful death lawsuits, regulatory penalties, criminal negligence charges." Richard's expression didn't change, but Daniel saw the muscle jump in his jaw. "Cost? Approximately $8 million in lost revenue, another $4 to $6 million in repairs and assessments." "Do it." Richard looked at the operations manager who'd been sitting quietly through the presentation. "Ground the vessels within the hour. Coordinate with our legal team on notifications. And I want a full investigation into inspection protocols at this facility." The board members filed out. The attorneys stayed behind, already making calls. Within minutes, the room had cleared except for Richard, Isabelle, and Daniel. "You cost the company $12 million this morning," Richard said. "We potentially saved lives," Isabelle replied. "Yes, you did." Richard turned from the window, and for the first time, Daniel saw something other than anger in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or reassessment. That was good work. Both of you. The presentation was thorough, professional, impossible to refute. Isabelle blinked, clearly stunned. I thought you'd be furious. I am furious. At the facility management that let this happen. At the inspection protocols that failed. At myself for not catching this sooner. He looked at Daniel. But I'm not furious at you for doing exactly what I've been telling this company to do for 5 years. Prioritize safety over profit. You found problems that could have killed people. You documented them properly. You made the right call. Daniel didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Richard Hartwell he'd expected. The heartless executive who valued money over lives. The reforms you instituted after the Meridian acquisition, Daniel said carefully. Your daughter told me about them. About how you used that accident to change industry standards. Something shifted in Richard's expression. You're talking about the Maya Reed case. She was my sister. The room went very still. Richard studied Daniel with new eyes, pieces clicking into place. I didn't know, Richard said finally. When HR recommended you for this initiative, I didn't connect the names. You're the brother who investigated the accident, who pushed for the inquiry. Yes. Your sister's death, Richard paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. It was unconscionable, preventable. It's why I made safety reform my primary focus after the acquisition. I have 3 daughters, Mr. Reed. The idea that any of them could have been on that vessel, could have died because of negligence. He stopped, gathered himself. I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry that it took a tragedy to force the changes that should have existed all along. Daniel felt Isabelle's hand find his under the table, squeezed gently. The apology was unexpected, inadequate, and somehow exactly what he'd needed to hear. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. Richard nodded, then his attention shifted to Isabelle. You've been pushing for more operational involvement. For real work instead of ceremonial appearances. This is what that looks like. Late nights, difficult decisions, standing up to the board. Still interested? Yes. No hesitation in her voice. Then you'll lead the investigation into the inspection failures. Reed, you'll head the technical assessment team. I want comprehensive reports on every vessel in the fleet within 90 days. Full authority to ground any vessel you deem unsafe. He looked between them. This is not a small assignment. This is career-defining work that will determine the future of this company's safety protocols. Can you handle it? Yes, they said in unison. Good. Richard gathered his papers, headed for the door. Then stopped, looked back. One more thing. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid. Whatever's happening between you two, keep it professional. Don't let it compromise the work. And understand that if this becomes a problem, I will separate you without hesitation. The company comes first. Always. He left. Daniel and Isabelle sat in stunned silence. Did that just happen? Isabelle finally asked. I think your father just gave us the most important project in the company. And basically told us he knows we're involved. And warned us not to screw it up. They looked at each other, and suddenly they were laughing. Relief and disbelief, and the giddy awareness that somehow, impossibly, things had shifted in their favor. We should celebrate, Isabelle said. We should sleep. We've been up for 24 hours. Sleep first, then celebrate. They returned to the hotel, crashed in Daniel's room this time, fell into bed fully clothed and slept like the dead until early afternoon. When Daniel woke, Isabelle was curled against his side, her hair falling across his chest, her breathing soft and even. He'd never felt anything like this, the rightness of it, the way she fit against him like she belonged there. All his careful walls, all his principles about keeping distance from privilege and power, seemed meaningless compared to the simple truth of this moment. Isabelle stirred, opened her eyes, smiled sleepily. Hi. Hi yourself. What time is it? 2 p.m. We slept for 6 hours. Good. I'm starving. She propped herself up on one elbow, looked at him with those eyes that saw too much and not enough simultaneously. Daniel, what are we doing? I don't know. But I know I don't want to stop. Even though it's complicated? Even though my father could still fire you if we mess this up. Even though. He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You were incredible today. The way you stood up to your father, the way you presented that case. You weren't playing at being competent. You were competent. Brilliant, actually. I had a good partner. We make a good team. We do. She leaned down, kissed him softly. I want this, Daniel. Not just the project, not just the work. This. Us. Whatever we're building here. Your father said to keep it professional. My father can't tell me who to care about. There was steel in her voice. I've spent my entire life doing what he expected, being who he wanted me to be. I'm done with that. If I'm going to do real work, make real choices, that includes choosing you. Daniel pulled her down, kissed her properly, felt her melt against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he said, I'm choosing you too, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything. They ordered room service, ate in bed, talked about the investigation they'd be leading and what it would mean for both their careers. Talked about Maya, about Richard's unexpected apology, about the strange turn their lives had taken. Tell me something, Isabelle said, stealing a French fry from his plate. If you could do anything, no limitations, no financial constraints, no expectations, what would you do? Daniel thought about it. Design ships. Not just propulsion systems or safety protocols, but entire vessels from the ground up. Ships that are efficient and safe and innovative. I'd want to build something that lasts, that matters. You could do that. With your talent, your experience. It takes capital I don't have. Connections I don't have. It's a nice dream, but it's not realistic. What if it could be? She was looking at him intently. What if we made it realistic? Isabelle, I'm serious. You have the vision and the skill. I have access to capital and industry connections. What if we built something together? Not now, not tomorrow, but eventually. A design firm, maybe. Or a consulting company that works with shipping lines on innovation and safety. Something that's ours. The idea took root in Daniel's mind, dangerous and alluring. That's crazy. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what we both need. Work that matters on our own terms. Your father would never support it. I don't need his support. I have my own trust fund, money my grandfather left me, completely separate from the company. I've never touched it because I didn't know what I wanted to build. But now, she smiled. Now I think I do. Daniel looked at her, at this woman who'd walked into his life and turned everything upside down, who made him believe in possibilities he'd given up on. You're serious, he said. Completely serious. But not yet. First we do this investigation right. We prove ourselves. We build our reputations on solid ground. And then, when we're ready, we build something that's just ours. A partnership. In every sense of the word. Daniel kissed her again, tasting hope and possibility, and the terrifying vulnerability of letting himself want something beyond survival. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, ambitious, unlikely plans that felt more real with every word. That evening, they walked through Portland's waterfront district, hand in hand like any other couple, anonymous in a city where no one knew their names or cared about the complications of their connection. They had dinner at a small Italian restaurant, shared tiramisu, laughed over wine. I can't remember the last time I felt this light, Isabelle said. Like I could just be a person, not a Hartwell. Get used to it. I'm not interested in Hartwells. Just Isabelle. Good. Because Isabelle is all I want to be. They walked back to the hotel as night fell, the city lights reflecting off the water, the air cool and promising. In the hotel lobby, Daniel pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he said. For what? For seeing me. For being brave enough to step into my world when you didn't have to. For making me believe that maybe I deserve something good. You deserve everything good, Daniel Reed. And I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you. They went upstairs together, no pretense of separate rooms now. Fell into bed and into each other, finally giving in to the attraction that had been building since that first moment in the engine room. It was tender and desperate and real. Two people who'd been lonely for far too long finally finding something that felt like belonging. Later, tangled together in the dark, Isabelle traced patterns on Daniel's chest. "This is going to be complicated," she said softly. "I know. My father, the company, people judging us, thinking you're using me or I'm slumming. I know, but I don't care. I don't care what anyone thinks as long as we're honest with each other. Then we'll be honest." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "I'm terrified of this, Isabelle. Of how much I feel, how fast it's happening, how much I could lose if it falls apart. I'm terrified too. But I'd rather be terrified and trying than safe and alone. When did you get so wise?" "When I met someone worth being brave for." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two people who'd found something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them desperately needed. The next morning brought emails, logistics, the beginning of the massive investigation they'd committed to leading. But for one night in Portland, they'd been just Daniel and Isabelle. No titles, no complications, no barriers. Just two people falling in love despite every reason not to. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The investigation consumed the next 3 weeks. Daniel and Isabelle worked 16-hour days, traveling between facilities, reviewing decades of inspection records, interviewing engineers and operations managers. They uncovered a pattern of negligence that went deeper than anyone had suspected. Not malicious, but systemic. Pressure to keep vessels in service, to meet quotas, to prioritize earnings over thoroughness. They documented everything, built a case that was irrefutable, and fell deeper into each other with every passing day. They were careful at work, professional distance in meetings, no obvious displays of affection. But everyone knew anyway. The way they moved in sync during presentations, the way Daniel's eyes tracked Isabelle across a room, the way she smiled at him when she thought no one was looking. Tommy Chin cornered Daniel in the break room on a Tuesday afternoon. "So, you and the boss's daughter. We're working together." "Right. Working together. That's why you've been showing up to the office wearing the same shirt 2 days in a row." Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. "Tommy, I'm not judging, man. I'm happy for you. She's good people. And you've been less of a grumpy bastard lately." Tommy grinned. "But you know the rumor mill is running overtime, right? What are people saying? That you're sleeping your way to a promotion. That she's slumming with the help. That Richard Hartwell is going to fire you the second the investigation ends. Take your pick." Daniel felt the familiar anger rise. "Let them talk. Just be careful, Reed. Office politics are brutal, and you two are giving people a lot to work with." But being careful felt impossible when Isabelle looked at him like he hung the moon. When they stayed up late reviewing reports and ended up kissing over spreadsheets. When she fell asleep on his couch while he worked, and he'd cover her with a blanket and feel his chest tighten with something that terrified and thrilled him simultaneously. 3 weeks and 4 days after Portland, they presented their preliminary findings to the board. The conference room was packed. Full board attendance, senior executives, department heads, legal counsel. Daniel and Isabelle had prepared exhaustively, knew their material cold, anticipated every question. The presentation took 2 hours. By the end, the board looked shaken. "You're recommending we ground 23 vessels," one board member said, his voice tight. "That's nearly a third of our active fleet. 23 vessels have structural or mechanical issues that pose immediate safety risks," Isabelle corrected. "Yes, grounding them will impact operations. But the alternative is catastrophic failure, loss of life, and legal liability that could destroy the company. The financial impact is acceptable compared to the human cost," Daniel interjected. "We've outlined a phased approach. Critical issues first, less urgent repairs scheduled to minimize operational disruption. But all 23 vessels need work, and they need it now." Richard had been silent through the presentation, his expression unreadable. Now he spoke. "What's the total cost?" $42 million over 6 months, Isabelle said. "That includes repairs, lost revenue, and implementation of new inspection protocols to prevent this from happening again." The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Board members arguing, executives calculating exposure, attorneys whispering about liability. Richard let it run for several minutes, then held up a hand. "We approve the recommendations," he said. "All of them. Ground the vessels, make the repairs, implement the new protocols. Miss Hartwell, Mr. Reed, you'll oversee execution. Report directly to me weekly." One of the board members, Gregory Carlyle, Preston's father, leaned forward. "Richard, this is excessive. We can prioritize the most critical repairs and phase the rest over." "We approve all recommendations," Richard repeated, his voice iron. "I will not have this company responsible for another accident because we chose profit over safety. If any member of this board has a problem with that, they can resign." Silence. No one resigned. "Meeting adjourned," Richard said. As people filed out, Daniel caught Gregory Carlyle staring at him with open hostility. The older man approached, his voice low and venomous. "Reed. A word." Daniel glanced at Isabelle, who'd been pulled aside by one of the attorneys. "Mr. Carlyle, I know what you're doing. Cozying up to Richard's daughter, making yourself indispensable, angling for a position you're not qualified for. It's transparent and pathetic. I'm doing my job. Your job is engineering, not corporate strategy. Not playing boyfriend to someone so far above your station you need a telescope to see her." Gregory smiled, cold and mean. "You're a mechanic who got lucky, Reed. Don't mistake temporary access for permanent belonging. The moment you're no longer useful, you'll be discarded. Is there a point to this? The point is that my son was perfectly suited for Isabelle. Would have been the ideal match for the Hartwell family. And you've somehow poisoned that opportunity with your—" he gestured dismissively. "Whatever this is. Richard might be too blinded by your supposedly brilliant engineering work to see what you're really after. But I'm not. And neither is anyone else with eyes." Daniel felt rage building, forced it down. "I think we're done here. We're done when I say we're." "Gregory." Richard's voice cut across the room. "My office. Now." Carlyle shot Daniel one more poisonous look, then stalked away. Richard approached, his expression impossible to read. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing I haven't heard before. He's angry about Preston. About Isabelle's rejection. Don't take it personally. Hard not to when he's calling me a gold-digging opportunist." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Are you?" The question hung between them, loaded and dangerous. "No," Daniel said. "I'm not after her money or her connections. I'm after her. Just her. And if that costs me this job, this opportunity, everything I've worked for." He met Richard's eyes. "It would be worth it." Richard studied him. "You mean that?" "Yes. My daughter is brilliant, capable, and chronically underestimated. She's also been sheltered, overprotected, and inexperienced in relationships with people who might want something from her." Richard's voice was quiet but intense. "If you hurt her, Reed, I will destroy you. Not professionally, that would be too clean. I will systematically dismantle everything you care about until you understand what it means to lose something irreplaceable." Daniel held his gaze. "If I hurt her, I'll deserve it." Something shifted in Richard's expression. Not approval, exactly, but a grudging respect. "Get back to work. And Reed, ignore Carlyle. He's bitter because his son is a mediocre man who wanted an exceptional woman. That's not your problem." Richard walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the conference room, trying to process what had just happened. Isabelle found him 10 minutes later. "Hey, you okay? I saw Carlyle talking to you." "I'm fine." He pulled her into a corner, out of sight from the hallway. "Your father basically just gave us his blessing. In the most terrifying way possible, but still." "What did he say?" "That he'd destroy me if I hurt you." Isabelle smiled. "That's practically a declaration of support from Richard Hartwell. Your family is insane." "I know. But you like me anyway." "I more than like you." The words came out before he could stop them, raw and honest. Her smile softened. "I more than like you too." They kissed, quick and fierce, then broke apart as voices approached in the hallway. Back to being professional, being careful, being aware that they were always being watched. That night, Daniel worked late in his office, finalizing repair schedules. It was past 11 when his phone rang, Tommy sounding panicked. "Reed, you need to get down to the shipyard. Now." "What's wrong?" "It's the SS Portland. Something's happening. Just get here." Daniel drove too fast through empty streets, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When he reached the shipyard, emergency lights were flashing, crew members running. And there, in the dry dock, the Portland listing at an angle that shouldn't be possible. "What happened?" Daniel demanded, finding Tommy. "Structural failure. The fractures you documented, they gave way during the repair work. The entire aft section collapsed. 3 workers were inside." Daniel's blood went cold. "Are they?" "2 got out. 1's still trapped. They're trying to stabilize the structure, but..." Tommy's face was grim. "Reed, if you hadn't documented those fractures, if we hadn't grounded this vessel, she would have been at sea. Fully loaded. Full crew. The failure would have been catastrophic." Daniel stared at the Portland, at the emergency crews working frantically, at the disaster that had been prevented and the narrower disaster still unfolding. "The worker who's trapped?" "James Mitchell. 43, 2 kids. Good guy." Daniel was already moving toward the vessel. "I'm going in." "Reed, it's not stable. I designed the reinforcement plan. I know that ship's structure better than anyone here. I'm going in." It took 20 minutes of careful navigation through twisted metal to reach Mitchell. The man was conscious but pinned under a collapsed beam, his leg clearly broken. Daniel worked with emergency crews to shore up the surrounding structure, carefully lift the beam, extract Mitchell without causing further injury. By the time they got him out and into the ambulance, Daniel was covered in grease and blood, some his own from a gash on his arm he hadn't noticed, and shaking with adrenaline. "You saved his life," Tommy said quietly. "If you'd been 10 minutes later." "But I wasn't." Daniel's phone rang. Isabelle. He'd forgotten to call her, to tell her what was happening. "Daniel, where are you?" "I've been calling." "Shipyard. There was an accident on the Portland." "Are you okay?" "What happened?" He explained, left out the parts about going into an unstable structure, about how close it had been. "I'm coming down there," she said. "Isabelle, it's midnight, you don't need to." "I'm coming." She arrived 20 minutes later, picked her way through the shipyard in heels and a dress. She'd clearly been at some company event. When she saw Daniel, saw the blood and the exhaustion, she went pale. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch." "That's not a scratch, that's Daniel, you could have been killed." "I wasn't." "Mitchell's going to be okay. Everyone's okay." But Isabelle was shaking, her composure cracking. "You went into an unstable structure. You risked your life." "I did my job." "Your job isn't risking your life." "Your job isn't." She stopped, pressed her hands to her face. "I can't do this." Daniel felt cold spread through his chest. "Can't do what?" "This. Us. Caring this much. I've been managing to convince myself that we could balance the work and the relationship, that we could keep things professional, that everything would be fine." "But Daniel," her voice broke. "I just watched you risk your life, and all I could think was, what if I'd lost you? What if something had happened, and the last thing we did was argue about expense reports?" "Isabelle, my father was right. We can't do this. We can't be together and work together and expect it not to compromise everything." "You don't mean that." "I do. I'm sorry, but I do." Tears streamed down her face. "You make me feel too much. You make me want things I can't have. A normal relationship, a life where I'm not terrified every time you go into an engine room. I thought I could handle this, but I can't." Daniel felt like he was falling. "So what, one accident and you're done?" "We're done. It's not just the accident. It's everything. The way people look at us. The things they say. Carlisle calling you a gold digger. People thinking I'm using you, or you're using me. The constant speculation about whether we're compromising the investigation." She wiped at her tears angrily. "I wanted to believe we could rise above it, but maybe everyone's right. Maybe this is impossible. Or maybe you're scared." Daniel's voice was harsh, hurt making him cruel. Maybe the first time things get real, get complicated, you're looking for an excuse to run back to your safe, controlled life, where no one challenges you and nothing actually matters. That's not fair. None of this is fair. You think I'm not scared? You think I haven't spent every day of the last month terrified that I'm not good enough for you, that eventually you'll realize you can do better, that I'll lose the best thing that's ever happened to me. He was shouting now, weeks of fear and insecurity pouring out. But I've been willing to fight for this, to risk the whispers and the judgment and everything else because you're worth it. Apparently, I'm not worth the same to you. Isabelle flinched like he'd struck her. You think this is easy for me? You think I'm not fighting? I've been fighting my entire life, Daniel. Fighting to matter, to be taken seriously, to be more than a name. And then you came along and made me believe I could have everything. Meaningful work and real love and a life that's mine. But maybe that's the fantasy. Maybe we can't have everything. So you're choosing the work over us. I'm choosing to not watch you die. The words tore out of her, raw and desperate. I saw what losing your sister did to you. I can't. I won't be someone else who loses you because ships are more important than safety, because the work matters more than the life. That's not what this is. Isn't it? You went into that structure without hesitation. You risked everything because that's who you are, someone who saves ships and saves people and doesn't think about the cost. And I love that about you. But I can't love someone I'm terrified of losing. The admission hung between them. The first time either had said love out loud, and it was in the context of ending things. Isabelle, I need space. I need time to think. We both do. She was backing away, creating physical distance. Maybe after the investigation is done, after some time has passed, we can... Don't. Daniel's voice was flat, empty. Don't do the thing where you pretend this is temporary, where you say maybe someday to soften the blow. If you're leaving, leave. But don't make me hope. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face, and he saw the moment she made her choice. Saw her pull back, close off, become untouchable again. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Then she walked away, and Daniel stood in the shipyard surrounded by twisted metal and emergency lights, feeling like something vital had been ripped out of him. Tommy approached quietly. Reed. Don't. Daniel's voice was barely recognizable. Just don't. He drove home in silence, let himself into his empty apartment, sat on his couch and stared at nothing. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages from Isabelle he couldn't bring himself to read. Finally, he turned it off. The gash on his arm needed stitches. He cleaned it, bandaged it badly, didn't care. On his coffee table sat the plans they'd been sketching for their future company. Design concepts for vessels, business models, dreams they'd built together over stolen hours and late-night conversations. Daniel gathered them all up and shoved them in a drawer where he wouldn't have to see them. She was right, he told himself. This had been impossible from the start. Different worlds, different lives, temporary insanity fueled by proximity and adrenaline. Better to end it now before they did irreparable damage to each other. But knowing she was right didn't make it hurt less. Didn't make his apartment feel less empty. Didn't make him less aware that he'd just lost the woman he loved because he'd done exactly what he'd always done. Put the work first, risked himself without thinking, proven that maybe he wasn't capable of being what she needed. Daniel lay awake all night, watching the ceiling, replaying every word of their fight, wondering how they'd gone from making plans for a shared future to destroying each other in the span of 3 weeks. Wondering if love was supposed to feel this much like drowning. Wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. Isabelle made it to her car before the sobs started. She drove home on autopilot, barely able to see through the tears, pulled into her building's parking garage, and sat there crying until she had no tears left. She'd done the right thing. The smart thing. The safe thing. So why did it feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life? Her phone was full of messages. Her father, colleagues, friends asking about the accident. Nothing from Daniel. She'd broken his heart, broken her own. And for what? Because she was scared? Because one close call had shown her exactly how much she had to lose? Isabelle went upstairs, took off the dress she'd been wearing. Had it really only been hours ago that she'd been at a charity gala, playing her role, pretending everything was fine? She put on pajamas, crawled into bed, and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Daniel's face when she'd said she couldn't do this. Thought about the hurt in his eyes when he'd accused her of running. Thought about how it had felt to be in his arms, to feel valued and seen and understood for the first time in her life. And she'd thrown it away because she was terrified. Her phone rang. Her father. She almost didn't answer, but avoiding him would only make things worse. Dad, I heard about the accident. Are you all right? I'm fine. Isabelle, I know about you and Reed. She closed her eyes. It's over. As of tonight. Silence on the line. Then, what happened? He went into an unstable structure to save someone. Risked his life without hesitation. And I realized I can't be with someone who does that, who makes me care that much, who could be taken away in an instant. Her voice cracked. I can't lose someone else, Dad. I can't. Someone else. She hadn't meant to say it. Hadn't meant to reference the mother she'd lost to cancer when she was 12, the grief that had shaped her entire adolescence, the reason she'd learned to keep people at arm's length. I ended it, she said. It's done. Isabelle, I need to go. I'll see you at the office tomorrow. She hung up, turned off her phone, and lay in the dark hating herself for being a coward, for hurting the one person who'd made her feel alive, for choosing safety over love. But she'd seen the blood on Daniel's arm, the exhaustion in his face, the reality of what his work demanded. And she'd known with absolute certainty that she couldn't survive watching him risk himself over and over, couldn't live with the constant fear of losing him. Better to lose him now on her terms than later when the choice was taken from her. That's what she told herself. And if it felt like the worst kind of lie, if every breath hurt without him, if she'd never felt more alone, well, that was the price of protecting herself. That was the cost of being smart instead of brave. Daniel threw himself into work with the kind of obsession that worried everyone around him. 2 weeks after the breakup, he barely slept, barely eaten, barely existed outside of the investigation. He reviewed every vessel in the fleet personally, spent 18-hour days in dry docks and engine rooms, drove his team to exhaustion trying to match his pace. Reed, you need to slow down, Tommy said, finding him in the shipyard at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. You've been here since yesterday morning. The SS Atlantic needs a complete propulsion overhaul. I'm documenting the scope. At 2 in the morning? The work doesn't stop just because... Daniel cut himself off, jaw tight. Because your heart got broken? Tommy finished quietly. Man, everyone knows. Everyone's seen how you've been since she ended it. You're killing yourself. I'm doing my job. No, you're hiding in your job. There's a difference. Tommy sat on a nearby crate, studying his friend. Have you talked to her? No. She's been asking about you. Through other people, subtle like. Wants to know if you're okay. I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like death. You're working yourself into the ground. And Reed, Tommy paused. The investigation's almost done. The report goes to the board in 3 days. What happens after that? Daniel hadn't let himself think about it. After the investigation, there was no reason for him to interact with Isabelle. They'd go back to their separate worlds, him to the engine rooms, her to the executive suite. The forced proximity that had brought them together would evaporate, and he'd be left with nothing but the ghost of what they'd almost had. I don't know, he admitted. Do you love her? The question hit like a physical blow. Daniel dropped his head into his hands. Yes, he said quietly. God help me, yes. Then why are you letting her go? She's the one who left, Tommy. She said she couldn't do this, couldn't be with someone who risks themselves. What am I supposed to do? Chase after her and promise to be someone I'm not? Or maybe you're supposed to fight for her. Show her you're worth the risk. She doesn't want me. That's bullshit and you know it. She's scared. You're scared. You're both doing the thing where you protect yourselves instead of protecting what you have together. Tommy stood. Look, I don't know much about relationships. But I know that what you two had, that was real. That was the kind of thing most people spend their whole lives looking for. And you're both just going to throw it away because one of you got scared and the other's too proud to fight back. It's not about pride, isn't it? She said she couldn't handle your work. You took that as rejection instead of fear. She pushed you away, and you let her, because some part of you was waiting for her to leave anyway. Waiting for proof that you weren't good enough, that this was too good to last. Tommy's voice was gentle but firm. But Reed, what if you were wrong? What if she's sitting in her fancy office right now hating herself for being a coward, wishing she had the courage to reach out but convinced you're better off without her? Daniel wanted to argue. Couldn't. Because Tommy might be right. What am I supposed to do? He asked. Show up at her office? Make some grand gesture? That's not who I am. No, but honesty is who you are. Real, unvarnished truth. That's what made her fall for you in the first place. You saw her clearly and told her the truth. Maybe she needs that now. Maybe she needs you to tell her the truth about what you're feeling, what you want, what you're willing to fight for. After Tommy left, Daniel sat in the empty shipyard, surrounded by vessels in various states of repair, and forced himself to think clearly. He loved Isabelle. That was the truth. He was terrified of losing her, had already lost her, in fact, and it had destroyed him. That was also truth. But Tommy was right about one thing. Daniel had let her walk away without really fighting. He'd been hurt, angry, and underneath all of that was the familiar certainty that he wasn't good enough for her, that eventually she'd realize she could do better. Her leaving had confirmed what he'd always secretly believed. Except, what if that belief was the lie? What if Isabelle hadn't left because he wasn't enough, but because she cared too much and didn't know how to handle it? Daniel pulled out his phone, stared at the dark screen. It was 3 a.m., completely inappropriate time to call. But when had they ever been appropriate? He turned on his phone for the first time in 2 weeks. 17 missed calls from Isabelle. 23 unread texts. His throat tightened as he scrolled through them. Daniel, please, can we talk? I know you're angry. I'm angry at myself too. I made a mistake. I know that now. But I don't know how to fix it. Are you eating? Sleeping? Tommy says you're working too much. I miss you. God, I miss you so much. The messages stopped after day 10. Like she'd given up on getting a response. Daniel's hands shook as he typed. I'm sorry I didn't respond. I needed time. Can we talk? He stared at the message for 5 full minutes before deleting it. Texting felt wrong. Cowardly. If he was going to do this, he needed to do it right. He needed to see her. Isabelle stood at her office window watching the sun rise over the harbor, coffee going cold in her hand. She hadn't slept. Again. 2 weeks of barely sleeping, barely functioning, going through the motions of work while feeling like she was missing some vital part of herself. The investigation report sat on her desk, complete except for her final review. She and Daniel had built it together. His technical expertise, her organizational framework, their combined determination to make ships safer. It was brilliant work, career-defining work. And all she could think was that it didn't matter without him. Her father had tried talking to her 3 times. She'd deflected each conversation, thrown herself into finishing the report, avoided any discussion of feelings or Daniel or her spectacular act of self-sabotage. But this morning, staring at the harbor where ships moved like pieces on a chessboard, Isabelle couldn't avoid the truth anymore. She'd made a catastrophic mistake. She'd let fear win. Had chosen the illusion of safety over the reality of love. Had convinced herself she was being smart when really she was just being a coward. Daniel hadn't responded to any of her messages. After 10 days of silence, she'd stopped sending them, convinced he hated her. Convinced she'd burned that bridge so thoroughly there was no path back. A knock on her door. Her assistant. Miss Hartwell, your father wants to see you. Of course he did. The board meeting to present the final report was this afternoon. Richard probably wanted to review her portion, ensure she was prepared, make sure she wouldn't embarrass the family name. Isabelle grabbed her coffee and headed to his office, trying to summon the energy to play the role of competent executive when all she wanted was to crawl back into bed and sleep for a week. Richard's office door was open. She walked in, started to speak, then stopped. Daniel stood by the window, wearing a suit she'd never seen before, looking exhausted and determined and heartbreakingly familiar. "I'll leave you two alone," Richard said, already moving toward the door. "Dad, you need to talk. Both of you. The board meeting is in 4 hours. Sort this out before then." He paused at the door, looked at Daniel. "Don't make me regret this, Reed." Then he was gone, and Isabelle was alone with Daniel for the first time since she'd walked away from him in the shipyard. "Hi," she said, her voice barely working. "Hi." Silence stretched between them, loaded with everything unsaid. "I got your messages," Daniel said finally. "All of them. I'm sorry I didn't respond. I needed time to think. I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure I do." He moved closer, and Isabelle could see the shadows under his eyes, the weight he'd lost, the evidence that he'd been suffering too. "You told me you couldn't do this. That it was too much, too scary, too complicated. And I let you walk away because part of me agreed with you. Part of me has always believed I'm not good enough for you, that eventually you'd figure that out and leave. So when you did, it felt like confirmation." "Daniel, but I've spent 2 weeks in hell, Isabelle. 2 weeks trying to convince myself you were right, that we were impossible, that it was better this way. And I can't believe it. Because what we have, that's not impossible. That's the realest thing I've ever felt." Tears spilled down Isabelle's cheeks. "I was so scared. When I saw you'd gone into that structure, when I realized you could have died, I panicked. I thought if I pushed you away, I could protect myself from losing you. But Daniel, I lost you anyway. I lost you because I was too afraid to fight for what we had. I went into that structure because it's what I do. It's who I am. I can't promise I'll never take risks, that I'll never put myself in danger. This work, ships, safety, engineering, it's not just a job to me. It's how I honor my sister, how I make sure her death meant something. I know, and I was wrong to ask you to be anyone other than who you are." Isabelle moved toward him, closing the distance. "I don't need you to be safe, Daniel. I need you to be you. The man who fixes engines and saves lives and sees me like I matter. I was scared of losing you, but I already lost you by pushing you away. And that's so much worse than the fear ever was." Daniel's jaw worked. "You broke my heart. I know. I'm so sorry. I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I didn't know it was possible to love someone this much, to have them become essential so quickly. And when you left," his voice cracked, "I didn't know how to breathe without you. I didn't either." Isabelle reached up, touched his face, felt him lean into her palm. "I love you, Daniel. I've loved you since you explained propulsion systems to me like I was smart enough to understand. I've loved you since you told me about Maya and let me see your pain. I love how you work, how you think, how you make me want to be braver. And I'm so sorry I wasn't brave enough when it mattered. You're brave now, because I finally realized that losing you to my own fear is worse than any other kind of losing you. At least if I fight for this, if we try and it's hard and complicated and scary, at least we tried. At least we were brave enough to reach for something real." Daniel pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this. I've never done this, been in love, built a relationship, figured out how to balance work and life, and all the complications. Neither have I. But maybe we figure it out together. Your father's still going to be a problem. The company politics, the rumors, all of it. I don't care. Let them talk. Let them think whatever they want. I'm done living for other people's opinions." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want you, Daniel Reed. Not because of what you can do for me, not because of any grand gesture or promise. I want you because you make me better. You make me real. And I'm tired of settling for anything less than real. I want you too. God, Isabelle, I want you so much it terrifies me." "Good. Be terrified with me. We'll figure out how to be brave together." Daniel kissed her then, desperate and relieved and full of 2 weeks of missing each other. Isabelle melted into him, tasted salt from tears she didn't know were falling, felt pieces of herself click back into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel said, "The board meeting is in 4 hours." "I know. We're presenting the investigation findings together. Everyone's going to see that we're back together." "Let them see." Isabelle smiled, actually smiled, for the first time in 2 weeks. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being ashamed of caring about you. If people have a problem with it, that's their problem." "You're sure?" "Completely sure." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "We did brilliant work on this investigation, Daniel. Work that will save lives, that will change how this company operates. And we did it together. That matters more than any rumor or judgment." A knock on the door. Richard's assistant. "The conference room is ready for you to set up your presentation." Daniel squeezed Isabelle's hand. "Ready. With you?" "Always." They walked to the conference room together, hand in hand, and didn't let go even when they passed executives who stared, colleagues who whispered. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Isabelle Hartwell had finally found something worth fighting for, and she wasn't letting go again. The board meeting was packed, full attendance, plus department heads, senior engineers, media relations preparing to issue the findings publicly. Daniel and Isabelle presented together, moving seamlessly through the technical findings and business implications. They divided the presentation strategically, played to each other's strengths, built a case that was unassailable. By the end, the room sat in stunned silence. "You're recommending a complete overhaul of our inspection protocols," one board member said. "Fleet-wide implementation of new safety standards. Ongoing monitoring systems that will require permanent staffing increases." "The cost? The cost is our license to operate," Isabelle said. "This investigation uncovered systemic failures that have existed for years. We're lucky we haven't had a major disaster. Implementing these recommendations isn't optional. It's the bare minimum of responsible operation." "Miss Hartwell is correct," Daniel added. "And I've designed the implementation to be phased, minimizing operational disruption while prioritizing critical safety concerns. The cost is significant but manageable. The cost of not implementing these changes, in lives, in liability, in reputation, is incalculable." Richard had been silent through the presentation. Now he stood. "I've reviewed these findings extensively. I've challenged every assumption, questioned every recommendation. And I've concluded that Reed and Hartwell have done exceptional work. Work that will define this company's future." He looked around the room. "We implement every recommendation. Full authorization for both of them to oversee execution. They report directly to me with complete autonomy on safety decisions." "Richard, that's an enormous amount of authority to give," Gregory Carlisle started. "To give to the two people who've proven they understand what's at stake and have the expertise to fix it." Richard cut him off. "Yes, Gregory, it is. And they've earned it. This meeting is adjourned." As people filed out, several executives stopped to congratulate Daniel and Isabelle. Some looked genuine, others calculating, still others uncomfortable with the obvious fact that they were together. "Quite the performance," Gregory Carlisle said as he passed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Professional distance seems to have been abandoned." "Gregory," Richard's voice was ice. "If you have concerns about the investigation's validity, express them now. Otherwise, keep your personal opinions to yourself." Carlisle left without another word. Other board members followed, until finally it was just Richard, Isabelle, and Daniel. "You two have a target on your backs now," Richard said. "People who resent the changes you're forcing. People who think you're moving too fast, costing too much. People who just don't like seeing a relationship between different levels of the company." "We can handle it," Isabelle said. "I know you can. That's why I'm promoting you both." Richard pulled out 2 letters. "Isabelle, you're now Vice President of Safety and Compliance, reporting to me. Full executive authority over all safety protocols and investigations. Reed, you're Director of Engineering Innovation, also reporting directly to me. You'll lead the technical implementation of the new standards. Daniel stared at the letter. Sir, don't argue. You've earned this. Both of you have. Richard looked between them. But understand what you're walking into. This level of visibility, this level of authority, it amplifies everything. Your successes, your failures, your relationship. You'll be under scrutiny constantly. Are you prepared for that? Isabelle looked at Daniel. He looked back at her. And they both smiled. We're prepared, Isabelle said. Together, Daniel added. Richard almost smiled. Good. Because the real work is just beginning. Get out of here. You both look exhausted. Take the rest of the day, get some sleep, celebrate. Tomorrow you change an industry. They walked out of the building into afternoon sunlight that felt new, promising. Daniel pulled Isabelle close, kissed the top of her head. Vice President Hartwell, he said, has a nice ring to it. Director Reed sounds pretty good too. We really did it. Changed everything. We did. She tilted her face up to his. What do we do now? Now we go celebrate. Have dinner. Sleep for 12 hours. Wake up and figure out how to change an industry while navigating a relationship that everyone's going to have opinions about. Sounds perfect. They walked to Daniel's truck hand in hand, aware of the stares from the parking lot, not caring. When he opened her door, Isabelle paused. Daniel? Yeah, thank you for fighting for us. For not giving up even when I did. Thank you for being brave enough to try again. For choosing us even when it's complicated. Always, she promised. From now on, always. They drove away from Hartwell Shipping headquarters, toward whatever came next, together. And for the first time in either of their lives, together felt like exactly where they belonged. 6 months later, the Atlantic Star cut through calm waters under a perfect autumn sky. Daniel stood on the bridge, reviewing the navigation systems with the captain, routine checks that had become his favorite part of the new job. As Director of Engineering Innovation, he spent half his time designing next-generation vessels, and the other half ensuring current ships met the exacting standards he'd helped establish. She's purring like a kitten, Captain Morrison said, pride evident in his voice. Best maintained vessel in the fleet. Your protocols made the difference, Reed. The crew made the difference. I just gave them the tools. His phone buzzed. Text from Isabelle. Bridge or engine room? He smiled. She always knew where to find him. Bridge, he typed back. Come up. A minute later, she appeared, wearing jeans and a Hartwell Shipping windbreaker, a far cry from the designer dresses and heels she'd lived in a year ago. She'd been on board for 3 days, conducting safety audits and crew interviews, doing the real work she'd always craved. Captain Morrison, she greeted warmly. How are we looking? Outstanding, miss, he caught himself. VP Hartwell, your safety protocols have transformed operations. Crew morale is the highest I've seen in 20 years. That's good to hear. Mind if I steal Director Reed for a few minutes? He's all yours. Isabelle led Daniel out onto the bridge wing, where they could see the endless expanse of ocean spreading in all directions. The wind caught her hair, and she leaned back against the railing with a contented sigh. I love it out here, she said. Away from the office, the politics, the constant scrutiny. Just the ship and the work and you. Daniel pulled her close, kissed her temple. 6 months, and they still haven't gotten bored of speculating about us. Let them speculate. We know the truth. The truth was that it hadn't been easy. The first few months after their reconciliation and promotions had been brutal. People questioning their professional judgment, suggesting their relationship compromised the investigation, making snide comments about favoritism and inappropriate workplace dynamics. But Daniel and Isabelle had faced it together. They'd worked twice as hard as anyone else, proven their value repeatedly, refused to hide their relationship or apologize for it. Slowly, grudgingly, most of the company had accepted them. The ones who didn't, like Gregory Carlisle, who'd eventually resigned from the board, had found themselves increasingly irrelevant. I have news, Isabelle said, turning to face him. I got a call from Maritime Safety International this morning. They want us to keynote their annual conference. present our findings, discuss the new protocols, show other companies how to implement similar reforms. Us. Together, they specifically requested both of us. Said our partnership, professional and personal, represents a new model for how safety and innovation can work together. Into it. The promotions, the new responsibilities, the satisfaction of changing Hartwell shipping from within. It had felt like enough. But Isabelle was looking at him with those eyes that still saw through every defense, every hesitation. My father's stepping back, she continued. Not retiring, but reducing his role. He's been talking about succession planning, about the next generation of leadership. She paused. He offered me CEO track. 5 years of grooming, then the position. Daniel's stomach dropped. Isabelle, that's everything you've worked for. Everything you've proven you can do. I know. And a year ago, I would have said yes immediately. Would have seen it as validation, proof that I matter beyond my last name. She took his hands. But Daniel, I've spent 6 months doing real work, making real change. And you know what I've learned? I don't want to run Hartwell shipping. I want to build something that's ours. Something that combines your vision with my business sense, your technical expertise with my understanding of how to navigate corporate structures. I want the design firm we dreamed about. You'd give up CEO to start a company with me? I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. She smiled. Besides, I already talked to my father. Told him I'm not interested in CEO track. But I'd be happy to continue as VP of Safety and Compliance for another 2 years while we build the foundation for our own venture. He wasn't thrilled, but he understood. Said I'm more like him than he expected. Too stubborn to follow someone else's path when I can build my own. Daniel felt hope and fear warring in his chest. This is a huge risk. The best things always are. What if we fail? Then we fail together. But Daniel, she moved closer, her voice intense. What if we succeed? What if we build something that revolutionizes maritime design? That proves ships can be efficient and safe and innovative all at once? What if we create a company where people matter as much as profits, where the work has meaning beyond quarterly earnings? He saw it then, the vision they'd sketched out on hotel stationery 6 months ago, now sharper, more detailed, more possible. A firm that designed vessels from the ground up, that consulted with shipping companies on safety innovations, that trained the next generation of engineers to think holistically about maritime systems. We'd need capital, he said slowly, and clients, and a team. We have capital. My trust fund is more than enough for startup costs. We have a reputation now. The investigation put us on the map. And we have connections throughout the industry. Isabelle pulled out her tablet, showed him documents she'd clearly been working on for weeks. I've been doing the math, Daniel. We could launch in 6 months. Small at first, just the 2 of us and a couple of designers. But within 2 years, we could be competitive for major contracts. Daniel scrolled through her projections, saw how thoroughly she'd thought this through. Revenue models, competitive analysis, potential client lists. This wasn't a dream anymore. This was a plan. You're serious, he said. Completely serious. I'm tired of working for my father's company, no matter how good the work is. I want to build something with you. Something that's ours from the foundation up. She searched his face. But only if you want it too. Only if this is your dream, not just mine. Daniel thought about his sister, about the promise he'd made to himself to make ships safer. Thought about the satisfaction of designing systems that worked, that saved lives, that mattered. Thought about doing all of that with Isabelle beside him, building something together that reflected both their values. Yes, he said. Let's do it. Her smile was radiant. Yeah. Let's build something amazing. Isabelle threw her arms around him, and Daniel lifted her, spun her around on the bridge wing while she laughed. When he set her down, they were both grinning like idiots. We're really doing this, she said. We're really doing this. My father's going to give us so much advice we don't need. Tommy's going to want equity. We'll have to name it something terrible. Reed Hartwell Maritime Design. Hartwell Reed, Daniel countered. Alphabetical. We're going to argue about everything. Probably. It's going to be hard work. Long hours. High stress. Definitely. But we'll be together. Always together. They kissed as the Atlantic star moved beneath them, steady and sure, built on innovations Daniel had designed and safety protocols Isabelle had implemented. Their work. Their success. The beginning of everything they'd build. 3 months later, Daniel stood in the empty office space they'd just leased. 6,000 square feet of former warehouse, all exposed brick and tall windows and potential. It needs work, Isabelle said, walking through the space with a contractor's assessment. New floors, better lighting, actual walls for offices and conference rooms. It's perfect, Daniel said. She looked at him like he was crazy. It's a disaster. It's ours. That makes it perfect. Isabelle's expression softened. She crossed to him, took his hands. You're sure about this? Walking away from Hartwell Shipping, from the security, from the steady paycheck. I've never been more sure of anything. Except you. Smooth talker. I mean it, Isabelle. A year ago, I was angry, alone, convinced I'd spend my life invisible in engine rooms. Then you walked into one wearing an expensive dress and asking questions about propulsion systems. And everything changed. You changed me too. Made me brave. Made me believe I could be more than a Hartwell. She glanced around the empty space. Made me believe we could build this. Daniel's phone buzzed. Tommy, signing the paperwork now. I'm officially your first employee. Don't make me regret this. They'd recruited carefully. Tommy as lead engineer, plus 2 designers from other companies who believed in their vision. A project manager who understood maritime logistics. Small team, but mighty. Tommy's in, Daniel said. Good. We'll need him when the first clients start demanding impossible deadlines. You mean the first clients you've already signed? Isabelle grinned. I might have preliminary agreements with 3 shipping companies for design consultations. Nothing major. Just enough to keep us afloat the first year. You're incredible. I learned from the best. She pulled out her phone, pulled up a photo. I've been working on logo concepts. What do you think? The design was elegant. Simple lines suggesting both a ship's hull and an architectural blueprint, with Hartwell Reed Maritime Innovation curved around it. It's perfect, Daniel said. Really? Because I have 17 other versions of you. He kissed her, cutting off the anxious rambling he'd learned meant she was nervous. When he pulled back, she was smiling. We're going to be okay, he said. Better than okay. We're going to build something amazing. Promise. Promise. The official launch party was small, just close friends, family, key industry contacts. They'd transformed the office space enough to be presentable, hung the logo, set up displays of their design concepts. Richard Hartwell arrived fashionably late, surveyed the space with his usual critical eye. It's rough, he said to Isabelle. It's a start. You could have stayed at Hartwell Shipping. Could have been CEO in 5 years. I know, Dad. But this, she gestured around the space. This is mine. Ours. Built on our terms, reflecting our values. That matters more than a title. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then, your mother would be proud. She always said you had too much fire to work for someone else, even me. He looked at Daniel. Take care of my daughter, Reed. I intend to, sir. For the rest of my life, if she'll let me. Isabelle's eyes widened. Richard's eyebrows rose. Daniel realized what he'd just said, felt panic and certainty warring in his chest. Well, Richard said mildly, I suppose we'll be seeing more of each other then. Excuse me, I need a drink. He walked away, leaving Daniel and Isabelle staring at each other. Did you just? Isabelle started. I didn't mean to, I did mean to, but not like that, not in front of your father. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Isabelle, I don't have a ring. I don't have a speech prepared. But I love you. I want to build this company with you, and build a life with you, and I can't imagine my future without you in it. Are you proposing? Badly, apparently. But yes. I'm proposing. Will you? Yes. She didn't let him finish. Yes, absolutely yes. They kissed while their guests pretended not to notice, while Tommy started a slow clap that became applause, while Richard Hartwell smiled into his drink and thought about stubborn daughters and the men brave enough to love them. 2 years later, Hartwell Reed Maritime Innovation had 15 employees, contracts with 8 major shipping companies, and a reputation as the most innovative design firm in the industry. Daniel stood on the deck of their latest project, a prototype cargo vessel incorporating revolutionary fuel efficiency designs and safety systems that exceeded any regulatory requirement. She was beautiful, sleek, a testament to what happened when vision met execution. "She's going to change everything," Isabelle said, joining him. She wore a hard hat and work boots, her wedding ring catching the light. 6 months married, and Daniel still felt a thrill every time he saw that ring. "We changed everything," he corrected. "Together." "Together," she agreed. The vessel would launch in 3 months. Their designs were already being adopted across the industry. And just that morning, they'd gotten the call. Maritime Safety International wanted to feature their work in a documentary about the future of shipping. "Maya would have loved this," Daniel said quietly. "Would have loved you. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." He pulled Isabelle close. "But I think she'd be happy. Knowing her death led to all this, the reforms, the innovations, the lives saved. That's what she would have cared about, making sure it meant something." "It meant everything," Isabelle said softly. They stood together as the sun set over the shipyard. 2 people who'd found each other in an engine room and built an empire on honesty, innovation, and stubborn refusal to settle for anything less than extraordinary. "What are you thinking?" Isabelle asked. "That 1.5 years ago, I was convinced I'd spend my life invisible in engine rooms, resenting people like you. And now," he gestured at the ship, at their company, at the life they'd built. "Now I have everything I never knew I wanted." "Me too." She turned to face him. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We're just getting started. 20 years from now, we'll look back at this vessel as our early work. Crude. Unrefined. Because we'll have designed things we can't even imagine yet. Together. Always together." Daniel kissed his wife as their prototype vessel gleamed in the sunset, a promise made of steel and innovation. Behind them, the Hartwell Reed Maritime Innovation logo flew on a banner. Proof that sometimes the impossible happens. Sometimes different worlds collide and create something better than either could have built alone. Sometimes a shipping magnate's daughter meets an engineer in an engine room, and they save each other. Sometimes love isn't just about hearts and romance. It's about partnership, respect, and building something meaningful together. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to fight for it, to choose it even when it's terrifying, to believe you deserve something real, sometimes you get your happy ending. Not perfect, not easy, but absolutely, completely worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. Daniel and Isabelle had built a company, built a marriage, built a life that mattered, and they were just getting started. 5 years after that first moment in the Atlantic Star's engine room, Hartwell Reed Maritime Innovation opened its second office. This one in Singapore, expanding their global reach. The christening ceremony for their latest design featured a familiar bottle of champagne, swung not by Daniel or Isabelle, but by a young woman named Maya Reed, Daniel's goddaughter, daughter of his late sister in spirit if not in blood. A scholarship student they'd sponsored through engineering school, now their newest designer. "My uncle always said the best way to honor someone's memory is to make sure their story creates change," Maya said in her speech. The original Maya Reed died because safety didn't matter enough. But because of her, because of what Daniel and Isabelle built in her name, thousands of people are safer today. Ships are better. The industry is better. That's what legacy means. Daniel stood with Isabelle, his hand on her growing belly, their first child, due in 3 months. They'd name her Emma, had already started planning the nursery and the home they'd bought overlooking the harbor. "Quite a journey," Richard Hartwell said, appearing beside them. He'd retired from Hartwell Shipping the year before, spent his time now mentoring young executives and spoiling his soon-to-be-born grandchild outrageously. "Thank you, Dad," Isabelle said. For letting me go. For supporting this even when you thought we were crazy. You are crazy, Richard said. Both of you. But you're also brilliant, stubborn, and apparently incapable of failing at anything you attempt. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your mother would be proud too. After the ceremony, Daniel and Isabelle walked along the dock where it had all begun. The Atlantic Star was in port, still sailing, still safe, still beautiful. Do you ever regret it? Daniel asked. Giving up CEO to build this with me? Not for a single second. Do you regret leaving your comfortable engineering job to take a risk on us? Best decision I ever made. He stopped, pulled her close despite her protesting that her belly made it awkward. I love you, Isabelle Reed. I love you too, Daniel Reed. She smiled. Still feels strange, being Isabelle Reed instead of Isabelle Hartwell. Better though. Better everything. They stood on the dock as ships moved in the harbor, as their company's banner flew from buildings that housed dreams made real, as the future stretched out bright and promising and theirs. Two people who'd been lonely in different ways, who'd found each other when neither was looking, who'd been brave enough to choose love over fear, partnership over safety, truth over convenience, who'd built something that mattered, not just a company, but a life rich with purpose and connection and the daily choice to see each other clearly. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, arguments, moments of doubt. But every morning, they chose each other again. And that choice, repeated daily, had created something stronger than either could have built alone. What are you thinking? Isabelle asked, the question she always asked when he went quiet. That I'm glad you came down to that engine room. Me too. That our daughter is going to grow up seeing what real partnership looks like. What's that? Two people who respect each other, challenge each other, build each other up. Two people who choose love every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Isabelle wiped at her eyes, blamed pregnancy hormones, pulled him close. Come on, she said. Let's go home. Home sounds perfect. They walked away from the shipyard hand in hand, toward whatever came next. Together. Always together. And that was more than enough. It was everything. When was the last time you chose something real over something safe? Sometimes the biggest risk is never taking one at all. Drop a comment about a time you were brave. We'd love to hear your story.